Hey guys, how are you all? I hope you all are doing well. Today we are gonna see an amazing what if story, but before we start, it's just a humble request that if you are new here, please subscribe because it actually motivates me a lot to post more. Also, the stories on my channel are fully written by me, so if you have any suggestions for what if stories, please let me know below the comment section. Now without any further delay, let's start. What if Harry Potter was Descedant of Devil Lord? Harry Potter was born to die. He knew this now. It was all planned from the beginning. A long time ago, Albus Dumbledore had planned it all out. If Harry were to die, he'd weaken Voldemort enough for the others to finish him off. Harry should have realized this was a loner. And it had an effect. The old man had been the only cover Harry had against the storm that was life, and the bastard had left Harry to die in the cold winds. Now, Harry James Potter stood on his own. His entire life and future standing before him. The sun had left him, his warmth long since left, leaving Harry feeling cold and hollow. His eyes landed on shadows, and he only saw the fires across Hogwarts lawn. And the bodies that had died in his name. Harry turned his eyes towards the domain of darkness that stood as the border of the place he had called his home, housing beings of horror. The Forbidden Forest. A habitat created by Godric Gryffindor and Helga Hufflepuff for the native creatures that lived in the land Hogwarts was built upon. Instead of Salazar and Rowena's suggestion of purging the land, the other founders had resolved the issue peacefully, and provided an oasis to call their own. The portrait of Hufflepuff had told him that, after he had found her stashed away in a dark corner of the castle the year before, he had offered to give her to Professor Flitwick, but she refused. The Grey Lady vanished after he told her about the portrait, and the castle was in confusion and discussion for many nights. So many people, students, teachers, and spirits had searched the castle, but none had found her. She had passed on finally. It was funny what one thinks of when they face death. Harry would have laughed at the thought, but his humor had left him dry and alone. As the forest cast its menacing gloom towards him, Harry thought and debated about his options. No matter how much his conscience and others told him to defeat Voldemort, that it was his destiny. Harry didn't want to die. There were so many things he had wanted to do, to see and experience. He wanted to run from here, never return, and leave Britain to its fate, but his friends wouldn't follow him, they wouldn't leave. They were determined to finish what had started in 81, they were so much braver than him. And they'd probably die because of that same bravado. He also figured he wouldn't get far, and Voldemort would come hunt him down until his final breath. He couldn't allow that. Harry doubted he would be enough to finish off Voldemort. He only had the knowledge of 6 years of Hogwarts. He was a student with almost no combat training whatsoever. He knew someone else would get what rightfully belonged to him, the revenge that Voldemort owed him. Knowing all he did, Harry decided to do all he could and give up on those that hid things from him, and tried to control him. Many would question his beliefs, but none would understand why he had walked into the forest that day, why he would forfeit his life to appease a madman. In truth, Harry had grown to hate his sad excuse for a life. He had no control over it, he never did. He always had someone watching him, controlling him, restricting him. He never got any choice in anything, from his lifestyle, to what he did. Then, there was the wizarding world. His world was conflicted about him, as one moment they'd cherish him, and the next hate him. He had put up with those sheeple for years. And he'd had enough of their turncoat nature. 7 years of their torment and attention would make anyone give up on the people that ostriched him in such a way, made him feel like a monster, and left expectations he could never hope to fulfill. Finally making his choice, Harry walked straight to the Forbidden Forest, and ignored his friends when they called for him, tried to make him see reason. Their reason was vastly different from his. After a few minutes into his trek, 2 Death Eaters found him wandering and brought him to Voldemort's clearing. In his last moments, Harry James Potter stared Tom Marvolo Riddle down. His quietness and his acceptance of his fate shocking even the Dark Lord. Death Eaters and Hogwarts captives alike looked on with interest and fear. Neither of the two spoke. A quiet confrontation passing between them. Green eyes burned into red, and both were blinded by Riddle's spell. Harry fell to the grassy ground seconds later, the life quickly leaving him feeling deathly empty. The last thing he heard from the world was Riddle's sharp, gloating laugh. "Sue, you're finally here." A deep voice spoke out in the curious darkness, making Harry rise from within himself. His consciousness rearing its head, Harry opened his emerald eyes and noticed that he was inside of some building, an office room by the looks of it. The wallpaper was a dark burgundy red, with faded silver stripes streaking down them, touching down onto the black carpeting. The room was dimly lit with antique gas lamps that gave off a warm orange glow, that both reassured Harry and unnerved him. The room was furnished nicely with many plush items, but kept an overall sense of professionalism. Harry was seated in a comfortable plaid-layered armchair, facing off against an odd, tall man. The man looked to be in his mid-30s, and had a full head of dark black hair which trailed down his neck, the tips standing up in a pointed mane. The man's skin was chalk white, not unlike a bleached skull, and would have made Harry think he sat in front of a statue, if the man hadn't spoke. The man's inquisitive eyes were glazed over gold, similar to a decades-old, beaten snitch. On the man's frame was a dark gray suit with various red accents on it, a black tie hanging loosely from his throat. "Where am I?" Harry struggled to say as his mouth was bone dry, making his voice come out ragged and cracked. His head wasn't much better, as he had a headache blistering throughout his temples, though thankfully it didn't come from his scar. "Where do you think you are, Mr. Potter?" the strange man asked, his tone almost amused at Harry's confusion, his almost pointed grin reaching to his stretched cheekbones. "Heaven," Harry guessed seconds later, his eyes slightly squinted in fear. Though he hadn't had time to focus much on religion throughout his life, he had to hope. "Hope for something, a chance." "Guess again," the man said, his smile growing impossibly larger, reminding Harry much of a cat he had seen in an illustration a long time ago in one of Hermione's Muggle books, something about it turning invisible. Hell," Harry stuttered out, shocked beyond belief as his entire life flashed before his eyes. "What have I done worthy enough of hell?" "You are correct, Mr. Potter, though I'm sure you have questions." "Ask them," the man asked, while slightly relaxing back in his tall black leather seat. With the patient manner the man used, Harry figured the man did this often. "Are you?" "Yes, I am the devil, the fallen angel, Abaddon, the father of sin, he who lives below, the man downstairs. The East, the dark spirit, the great darkness, Hades, Pluto, the old serpent, Satan, Lucifer, Echaban, the accuser, the betrayer, the beautiful, Beelzebub, the prince of darkness, the true sin. The son of perdition, the wicked one, the gloater," Harry spouted out, before he caught himself quickly. "Oh shit," he thought before gulping down what saliva he had left, which wasn't much at all. "What do you mean, Lucifer?" Harry asked, wondering if he could refer to him by the name. From his history in the Muggle world, Harry had heard the Christian name more than others. But he had heard the name Gloater mentioned in the Dursley house. "The name's all right, I've heard it for centuries from Christians when they're not calling me Satan and yelling at me. When I said I chose, I mean I chose you. I decided to trade God, a soul, in exchange for yours," Lucifer said with evident annoyance, leaving no doubt in Harry's mind that Lucifer and the other entity didn't get along. Just as the story went, "You see, Harry, I reaped a soul not too long ago, which the great almighty Lord wanted badly. I decided to hold on to that soul until you died, because I saw your potential. You were meant to go to heaven with the other folks, your family of course, but I wanted you. God wanted Albus, too many names, Dumbledore to go to heaven for his good deeds. But he went to hell for his bad ones, right into my hand. Quick as I could, I traded him the fool's soul for yours," Lucifer said in a lengthy manner, though he said it in a way that made it seem like he'd done a wonderful and cunning feat. Why would you do this? Why me?" Harry asked breathlessly, his mind racing in his wonder for why Lucifer would want him to suffer for nothing. "Just to one-up God perhaps. Because I need you. This world sucks utter ass. It was more enjoyable back in the Greeks and Romans' time, as I had followers to worship me, give me offerings. But all Avenue nowadays are freaks that give me slaughtered goats. I know I used one as a form sometimes. But don't want fucking goats. Why don't they get it? It's always goats, or virgins, Lucifer said in a loud tirade, before trailing off his explanation in deep thought. After several moments, he realized himself and turned back to Harry. Look, I barely have any say in things, and my only playing card left is Riddle. He falls, and I'm out of the game. I gave him time, even though he's tried to escape me, I gave him a chance. He's a damn failure, and I can't rely on him. Harry, I pity you, you've suffered, you're endured. And you've been betrayed and lied to, and it breaks what heart I have left. I've been there, and lived it so many times over, Lucifer said in a broken and grim tone, his eyes going empty for a few seconds, just looking into nothing. When Harry let out a cough, however, the man returned his attention to him. Now then, you don't have to believe me, I mean I am Satan. But I know a lot of things about your friends. Things I think you'd like to hear, Lucifer explained in a low tone, his hands raising to form air quotes when he said friends. Harry just GULPED at the thought of what the man could mean. Like what? Harry asked, not wanting to interrupt the man that could doom him to eternal punishment, but his curiosity and fear fought off his logic. Quote, like how most of your friends were either bribed or bargained into being your friends, or how Dumbledore wanted you to die by Voldemort, so he could take all the credit. Weasley was only in it for money and fame. And Granger wanted all of your vault books, along with a shot at Mistress of Magic. She took more to persuade in the end, but Weasley signed on back in 1991. Just to tell ya, the werewolf and the mutt were innocent. So don't think they had anything to do with it. The rest of them kept this secret from you, as they considered it necessary for Dumbledore's greater good scheme. Lucifer explained, his story racing by as the revelations hit Harry, one by one. Lucifer watched him, before dropping the bombshell. Oh, yeah, you know that girl of yours, Harry. Ginevra. Yeah, Harry responded, not sure whether he wanted to hear what this truth would be. Overall, he was heartbroken about the betrayals, though he had been theorizing about the actions of those he called friends and family. It was only the news of Remus and Sirius being innocent that kept him from breaking into tears. Well, you don't love her. The red bitch woman known as Molly Weasley drugged you to love her child, so that once you died, your demonic ginger spawn would get everything. That bitch was planning things out from the start, forged herself this half-assed contract and all. By the way, her plan worked, you're a daddy, Lucifer said, yelling out the last bit as if it was something to celebrate, though there was still an angry shade in the man's eyes. Oh bloody, that bitch, Harry screamed out in his mind. Every moment he'd spent with the wench now flying through his memory, the pieces coming together. He'd been played. There, Harry, everyone has children they don't like, even me. And he hasn't called me in centuries, Lucifer said, no longer gloating, but now showing honest pity and a bit of shame. The last time I saw him, he was working as a fashion designer in New York. Making trendy and fashionable clothes for young people. Sympathy from the devil, how ironic. My life is fucked then, isn't it? Harry asked in a shaky voice, as he started to break down from the stress and realization of everything. He was cracking. It's been fucked since the beginning, Harry, but that's why you're here. I need someone to help put things back in my control. You need help putting your life back together. I want you to help me, and in return I will give you the ideal life, but it won't be easy. It will take time and effort, of which you'll face great challenge and danger. I will send you back in time to a point of your choosing, in order to redo things in a sense, as long as you help me in the process. I'll give you 4 choices, see that? God would only give you one, Lucifer said in a jovial mood, obviously trying to convince Harry that he was better. He found it amazing that the man could jump from emotions like that, though he figured something was wrong with him. Choice number 1, I bring you right back to life, so you can finish off Voldemort and get revenge. I heavily advise you not to choose number 1 though, as you will be killed. Let or be left to rot in Azkaban after Voldy dies. Number 2, I'll send you back to 1991 to attempt to redo things, which might be a bit hard for you, and probably take you a while, but you might be able to fix everything. Number 3, I'll send you to 1971, so that you can train and help your parents to be ready for that Halloween and survive. Kind of boring in my Opinion and they might cramp your style a bit, but hey. Family matters after all. Number 4. I'll let you run and stomp all over history, going wherever and whenever you want, do whatever. You wanna kill Hitler? Bring him on. You wanna stop America from happening? Let's go kill some Yankees. You wanna kill every single figure of authority in the world, and plunge it into anarchy. Viva la anarchy. I'm giving you the keys here, Harry. Which car do you wanna drive? Exclamation mark quote. Lucifer said, extremely excited and loud, with an intense glare in his eyes, which kind of scared Harry. The man reminded Harry much of a child, though he figured the man was almost always like that. I need to think about this, Harry said, debating about what he wanted. He didn't know really, as his entire life and memories had been shifted. He didn't even know who he was anymore, as that life had been the product of a manipulative old man. I thought so. Well, I'll have an imp escort you to a place to stay. Get some sleep. Think on it a little, Lucifer said, slightly disappointed. His face drooping down, Harry swore he saw a small tear drop from the man's eye, which didn't make him very confident about the man. What kind of person cries at the thought of not committing genocide? I will, thank you, Harry sincerely said, before following an imp out of the room as quick as he could. I'm trusting this guy, he thought as his mind raced. Harry was intrigued by hell. It wasn't anything like he'd been told. He expected fire, screaming, death, demons, and things like that, but it was a bit disappointing, to be honest. It looked a little bit like Earth, but different. It had a sky, and buildings, among other things. But everything was off. The sky was black, as if it was stuck in constant night. The buildings and architectural features of hell were all made out of this same black metal that reflected what moonlight there was. There were red clouds framing the sky, only deeming to make the golden moon shine and burn through the sky, casting orange light across hell. The scarlet clouds shook every so often, raining dark ash across the land, blanketing everything in a black haze. Though the main thing Harry realized was that the place was scorching, unbearably hot. Well, guess hell being inside the earth is wrong, Harry thought to himself as he attempted to not get covered in the wet ash, only to realize that the heat instantly burned the ash, causing it to crumble off his clothes in clumps. Harry then realized that he wasn't wearing his old clothes, but a simple dark gray t-shirt, obsidian black skinny jeans, and wine red lined sneakers. He had been on guard and watching for any demonic beasts that could have showed up, but besides the imp, he hadn't seen anything, except he had noticed the people that walked asphalt-paved streets. Each and every one of them was unrealistically beautiful, and dressed to match in stunning clothing. Once he saw them, he couldn't take his eyes off of the women, who seemed to encourage his gaze, sending winks and other gestures towards him. Before he could walk towards them, he felt a strong pull on his shirt, and found his attention being drawn back to his short guide. Succubus's kid, ya gotta be careful round here, the imp said in a bark, before leading him down a different street than the one they had been on, and away from the crowd. What's a succubus? Harry asked childishly, as his knowledge of demons stopped at dementors. Despite the warning, he still found eyes trailing towards them, but kept resisting them. See all those pretty ladies over there? The imp asked him, pointing an arm in the direction they'd come from, Harry nodding at the question. A giant neon sign of a cartoonish demon read, "The Underworldly Hotel." We're here, the imp simply said before leading Harry into the building, revealing a beautifully made-up lobby, with a curly-haired skeleton manning the front desk. The imp led Harry into a simple elevator, and pressed his finger against the wall, which revealed a hidden button that wasn't there before. As the elevator kicked to life, creepy, eerie music began to play. Over and over, the song spoke of scary skeletons, or something like that. But Harry was far too withdrawn into his own mind to notice something like that. Once it reached a floor that went farther up than the building should have allowed, the doors shot wide open, allowing them to continue. Imp showed Harry down a long hallway, which seemed to go on for miles. The walls were a slight yellowy color, and had a faded floral print on them which didn't really fit with the carpeting. The carpet was orange, and had strange octagonal shapes on it that patterned back and forth. Harry could have sworn he saw a squeaking sound bouncing throughout the halls as they walked. But he only spared a single thought on it. They walked past several doors before they reached a solid black door, with a gold plate on it. The number on it was red with an elegant black font. Room 13. You're lucky kid, old Lucy gave ya a special room. Other ones being 11 and 17. The imp added for some reason, but it seemed to find humor in it. I wonder how Lucy would Ray court to his minions disrespecting him like that. He'd probably kill them, Harry thought to himself, as he pictured the man's reaction. Well, aren't ya gonna go in? The imp said, before pushing Harry into the room, rudely he might add. Harry shoved aside his hesitation and stepped inside the ominous room. Room 13 was amazing, at least to Harry. It was larger than the entire first floor of number 4 on Privet Drive, and much taller. It was a single-room plan, much like a standard hotel room, despite the fact he had only seen hotels through the television. In the middle of the room was a large bed, decked in dark red and black coverings, and a mountain of pillows. Off to a corner was a personal kitchen, stocked with appliances and food. A huge bathroom stood through the only other door in the room, and appeared to be luxurious with its tube. To Harry's immense surprise, the room was filled with a large variety of Muggle-made things. A large television hung on a wall, some kind of small oven sat atop a countertop. An air conditioner was latched on another wall, and a weird flat computer by the looks of it was laid on a black oak desk. Overall, Harry liked the room immensely, but he definitely didn't want to stay there longer than he had to. It seemed too perfect, though he was paranoid. With the paranoia, was a regular argument going back and forth in his mind. I have to get back and defeat Voldemort. I don't have to go back. Do I? No, I don't. But nothing, we're done. We can move on. After he fought with himself for close to an hour, Harry decided to simply sleep on it. He slipped off his trainers, and placed his new glasses on a glass side table that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. Well, time for nightmares, Harry thought before slipping into the peaceful darkness. Not having a single ruined dream. My lord, what is on your mind? A pudgy demon that served as Lucifer's advisor and butler asked from the marble doorway, his look directed firmly on Lucifer, who lounged uncomfortably on his throne. I'm worrying about this Harry. I know he has the potential to become what we need him to be, but I don't believe he's going to be willing to. He's different from the others. Too much like the original. Lucifer pondered, wondering about his would-be protege. I wouldn't advise it, my lord. There's a strong chance he'll reject you too, and run too. No, who? The advisor said timidly, hoping his lord wouldn't punish him, and would just get rid of the boy, as he didn't like any of Lucifer's chosen. You might be right, but something must be done. I won't feel right if I don't help, and there's no one to help him. Elohim will just keep him trapped, and that boy doesn't do well with confinement. Besides, no way in am I letting him pamper Dumbledore while Harry suffers unfairly. We've already lost one. I won't let another slip through my grasp, Lucifer said, his stance tough and rigid as he thought on his problem and the past. He then rested his jaw on his hands, and just sat there for several moments. His issues weren't going to be simple to fix, and he still had much to do that night, even though it would never end in hell. He still kept track. After taking a breath, he turned to the shaking demon, and let out a single command. You shall wake him in the morning, breakfast in hand. Anything he needs, you will give him. Have I made myself clear? Lucifer asked, voice rumbling loudly in the throne room, the tone freezing the advisor to the bone. Of course, my lord, of course, the advisor said stiffly, as he scampered from the room in fear and frustration. I can't believe this. Serving the devil's pet, the advisor thought as he stalked away from the throne room. There must be something I can do about this. I could, the advisor thought, before facing the facts. His lord wouldn't stand for another betrayal, and would likely destroy him for his insolence. With that, the demon walked off, his thoughts dwelling on a question. What makes Harry Potter so special? Harry Potter found himself at a split of crossroads, and was fighting both his desires and morality on where to go with his afterlife. He was told of his options once he arrived, of course, which he still found himself thinking over. After waking up from his sleep to a dark, scarlet night, furthering his confusion over Hell's passage of time, He still had trouble accepting everything that had happened the night before. That aspect was slightly sad, as there never was a day or a morning in hell, on account of there being no sun. Hell was timeless in a sense, and days were only counted by assumption. He was lost really, and he kept finding himself flickering through his memories, going over every regret and decision and hating himself for not correcting them. In short, it was depressing as hell, and he was consumed in angst and sadness, not really sure who he was, used to be, or should be. After what felt like eternity, but in reality was no more than 2 weeks, Harry found the urge to leave his luxurious hotel suite. The floor he resided on was relatively empty, and for some reason, none of the doors would open. Whenever he tried, he almost felt like he wasn't meant to do this. He left not soon after, leaving for the strange lobby he had seen on the trip there. He wasn't going to be a prisoner. The underworldly hotel was an oddity. It was large, seemed endless, and had an array of strange residents. As he had noticed on his frequent trips to the hotel's cafeteria, the guests had some aura about them. Every resident had some sort of blur to them, disguising their features, and adding a disturbing filter to their voices. Harry had one as well, which was weird, and it apparently kicked in whenever he stepped into the lobby and stopped the second he entered the main elevators. He assumed it was to protect the identities of the hotel's guests, but he couldn't understand why they went to such extremes. Why would you hide your identity, if you've already lost it? Who is Harry Potter? That was the question he couldn't escape. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, hero of magical Britain, defense prodigy, slayer of evil, the golden boy of Gryffindor, Dumbledore's apprentice. That was the life he'd lived from birth to death. That was who he was. A hero, a shining light, in the murky and corrupted world of magic and horror. He put his strength, his courage, his heart into protecting the world, and all of those who lived in it, and bared his soul to them. They ruined him. They abused him, used him, bled him dry, burned the heart out of him, and left him to his own devices. They let him destroy himself, and destroy himself, he did. They didn't stop there, however. They couldn't let him be a loose end. They cut him, sliced him free of the shroud of life. They put him down like a damn dog when they were done with him. Life, he had learned. He wasn't meant for it. Wasn't meant to be his own man, to know love or peace. He was born to be a puppet, born to be used, born a weapon. He lost his use, and they destroyed him. Harry knew that now, knew the horrid truth that they had hid from him for so long, but it still made him sad. Still made him cry, still broke his heart, still hurt his soul. Regardless, he couldn't hide in his past, couldn't go back to who he used to be. He knew now, Harry Potter was dead and buried. Who he was now, he didn't really know. But, if he knew one thing, he would find out. Harry wasn't powerless. Despite the fact his magic had seemingly abandoned him, he still had power. He had choices, and his decision gave him a power no one could steal from him. The power of possibility. He thought for days over his choices, thinking over what he truly wanted, what he truly desired. Did he want kinship, as the mirror had shown him so long ago, when he'd been just a mere child? Did he want closure, to finish his affairs, and close the storybook he'd lived in for so long? Was that it? Or did he really want to go through all that he had, all over again? Start from point one, and do every single thing, all over again. He thought over his choices, and knew he had only one to choose. His decision was made, however. Harry knew that he wouldn't feel right causing destruction, so anarchy was knocked out right away. Despite his torment, despite his losses and hardships, he wouldn't become a monster. He wouldn't become Voldemort. He couldn't go back either. He couldn't look those traitors in the eye, and resist killing them on the spot. Lucifer had told him what would happen if he just went back to life, went back to that damn forest. To those bastards that called themselves his friends, and he didn't find dying again, or retirement in Azkaban very attractive. He also didn't want to waste effort helping those traitors. He couldn't believe it, really. Those that he had known for so long had all been playing him along. He didn't want to believe any of this. he still hoped it would all turn out to be some horrible dream, and he'd wake up back in Gryffindor Tower, but he couldn't go back. That world was dead, and he knew it. Harry Potter had lived in a world of lies, and all those he knew had fed him it at every turn. Now, he had found the truth, or at least what seemed to be it. He had to believe it, as he had to have something to hold on to. And frankly, Lucifer had no reason to lie to him, well, besides being the devil that is. Harry would prefer naturally not to work with Satan. But he knew that he'd have to, as no one else would. Despite his hesitations, he couldn't let go of this. The man's offer was too great to let go of, no matter what he chose. He had wanted so badly to meet his parents and save them, but he knew that it'd be difficult. No matter how bad he felt, how guilty he felt for abandoning them to their fates, there were too many things that could go wrong with that. There was the chance they wouldn't believe him, or he could be killed by them. They had been living in paranoia, and he didn't doubt that an unknown breaking into their home and claiming to be their child would set them off. Besides them, there was also the fact that Voldemort had been at the height of his power at the time after all. After dismissing that option, he knew what he had to do. Harry stepped to the edge of his suite, and opened the door. He'd made his choice. "Hello there, Mr. Potter. Can I get you anything? A drink, breakfast, eternal death?" The advisor said, and thought upon seeing the boy once again. He'd decided that he'd dispose of the boy if he could. He'd just have to make it look like the boy wandered into the fields of punishment. But he knew of course that he couldn't do that easily. "No thank you. Can I speak with Lucifer? I've decided on what I want," Harry politely said to the man, watching him closely. He could tell there was something off about Lucifer's advisor, and knew that there was some motive behind the man's sudden kindness. The little man was one person Harry definitely didn't want to be in a dark alley with. "All right then, I'll escort you to his court." Quote, Lucifer looked at him with a shining gold view, the color matching the many metals touching on his body. His frame was covering by a pressed black suit, the material a dark black, which clashed with his scarlet crown, golden armoring, and pointed cape. "You have, so, anarchy?" Lucifer asked cheerfully, his tone reminding Harry of a wishful child, ignorant at the fact his wish wouldn't come true. Harry just shook his head, which immediately saddened the man. "No, I want to start over. You said you'd help." Of course. Well, it isn't what I'd choose. But I'm just glad you didn't go back. Think about what you want to change, and make some plans. I know you're smart enough. It'll take a little while to send you back to 91 feet. Lucifer said in a rush, before looking down at Harry once more. "I have some work to do first. You should head back to the hotel, and get to work." With that, he began ushering Harry out of the throne room. And only after the boy left did he step down. When Lucifer's sharp loafers touched marble, he turned and began heading down the nearest hallway, purpose and instinct in his step. Lucifer walked outward through his fortress, corridor through corridor, not a glance spared to anything until he finally arrived at a small solemn room. The wall were a pitch black stone, a gray patterning interlaced in its design. The dark of the room were in turn complemented by the choice of blood-red tiled floors, which cast a gory light across the room. On the walls were many different doors, each with a different sign above. Some being standard symbols, such as arrows, others, different ones. The doors were special in a way, as a new one would join the others every so often, but only when a new incarnation of Lucifer was created as well. One sign, above a silver door, had a simple symbol. An arrow pointing eastward, another westward. There were many doors such as these, all facing a different direction in a hexagonal shape. Each door had a separate symbol, all unique, but one stood out. Lucifer walked past them all, to a solid black door, the center door, made of a rough and mangled wood, making the door look as if it came from an obliterated building. Atop the doorway were two glowing symbols, a silvery shine flying from them. The symbols on it read, "Way Lie." He grabbed the triangular doorknob, and pulled the door free, the empty space showing what appeared to be a medieval castle in ruins. "Ah, the Mirai door. Thank you, Japan," Lucifer muttered, before stepping into the mysterious door. And with that, he was gone. Hogwarts, Greater Scotland, May 2, 1998. The war was over. Harry Potter was dead, his life ended by Tom Marvolo Riddle. A self-proclaimed Dark Lord. The last of his Horcruxes. His precious familiar Nagini had been destroyed in a rush. The wicked Voldemort was reduced to a mere mortal, vulnerable to the smallest cut or wound. After Harry fell, Voldemort let out a scream of agony, as the strain of prolonged life and a shattered soul caught up to him, causing him to collapse to his knees. Before anyone could comprehend Harry's death, let alone Voldemort's agony, a loud bang echoed throughout the forest, drawing the shocked people to the scene in front of them. Neville Joel Longbottom gripped in his hand an object he'd been given the day before, an object few there would recognize. An object he had hoped he'd never need. Within his grasp lay an aged and battered Enfield rifle that had once belonged to his lost grandfather, Orul Longbottom. His ancient and battered rifle was aimed at the now dead body of Tom Riddle, a man whose death now stained his hands. Immediately after he had fired it, and its use was applied, the old rifle crumbled in Neville's hands, creating a broken pile of twisted metal and wood on the grass. His grandmother Augusta had pulled him aside the day before, and told him how she had heard he was to help in the fight against the Death Eaters, and offered the rifle as a last resort. She had told him of the rifle, his grandfather's acquisition of it, and its condition. The rifle was in a damaged state, the many uses of it over the years, and the lack of proper maintenance, had reduced it to the sorry state it was in. A single shot would cause it to break after one use. She gave him a single rifle round, N.D. told him to use the rifle to kill who he thought deserved it, and he had promised her that he would. His original plan was to deliver the round straight into Lestrange's skull, but a shot at Voldemort himself couldn't be passed up. He had made his decision on the fly, and before anyone could stop him, he popped Riddle's head with a single shot. Muscle, blood, and brain matter splattered him in the grass before him. His form was now covered in blackened blood, which now began to sizzle and burn him, but he paid it no mind. Neville wasn't there fully, as the weight of his actions began to set in. The Dark Lord was dead. He had killed a man, albeit an evil one. He had still taken a life. He had taken the life of another, and just as black stained his fingers, he could have sworn there was a similar stain on his soul. "You bastard!" A shrill and outraged voice screamed out in the silence of the forest. The woman he hated most in the entire world, the one who had taken all he had, she was here, and so close. Bellatrix Lestrange screamed out into the forest, her anger and grief obvious to all present. Even as her wand was focused on him, his eyes stayed locked on hers. He wanted her to know that he regretted nothing. Within the next few seconds, a blinding green flash roared towards him, but he did not flinch. He didn't turn away. Neville faced death as a warrior, not as a coward. Avada Kedavra. A second later, the Longbottom line died, the grandmother unable to continue it. A second after that, the Lestrange line died. The Lord, Lady, and Duke all dead. In the rush of flashing wands, it wasn't known who was the one to kill Bellatrix Lestrange, as many fired at the exact same time. In actuality, it was a beautiful blonde, dressed in long black robes with yellow lining. Her heart broken, she poured all she could into the spell, causing it to outshine all of the rest. Though the Dark Lord had been killed, along with his most loyal follower, and both of the boys who had lived, the fight had continued. The war had been fought, but the battle had not. An hour later, every Death Eater had died, as the battle had required. The light had been hurt as well. Besides of their largest losses, and their reluctant battling, many good people fell for the cause. Fred, Arthur, and Bill Weasley fell, their family fallen into darkness. After that, the married Lupins fell, the both finally accepting each other and themselves, and dying together. Though their world was spared, the war might as well been lost. The order was finished, the resistance was crushed, the ministry lay in ruins. The staff of Hogwarts lay dead and the castle itself, and many students and civilians lost their lives. With the battle, many surprises were had, and many faced. The most surprising were the sudden additions to the fighting lines, and the turncoats. One such defector had been Draconis Malfoy, who had swapped sides with the fall of his mother. It was his wand that struck down the infamous Death Eater, Rookwood, only to fall to Dolohov seconds later. Once the few surviving wounded had been treated, and the dead were prepared to be buried, many of the grieving gathered in the remains of what had been known as the most unified and recognizable place of hope in all of the wizarding world. The Great Hall of Hogwarts. The lucky, or unfortunate, survivors talked and mourned over their lost loved ones, along with their allies, their grief shared among them, helping them to recover, if only slightly. Many of the people were lost in their own little worlds, and weren't noticing the simplest things around them. Their sadness, loss, and horror clouding their vision and minds. Unknown to them all, there was a few ghostly people left behind, those that had chosen or been unable to move on. Or in one case, one that didn't know how to. "Hello, Neville Longbottom," a solemn voice muttered softly, causing Neville to realize he was still residing in the living world, as much as a spirit could. Neville's eyes shot open at the voice, and shook in shock as he looked over himself, and noticed he looked all right. He didn't appear too different, the exceptions being that his entire body was transparent. And there was a black hole where his heart was meant to be. Feeling a strange calm overcome him, Neville looked towards where the voice had come, and noticed an oddly quiet blonde standing there. He wondered how exactly she could see him, as he was pretty sure he was dead. About 90% sure. Maybe 80. "Luna, I'm a ghost?" Neville asked in disbelief, as he looked through his hands and saw what appeared to be faint blue veins coursing through them, and his nails were jet black. It had all happened so fast, that he hadn't even realized he'd died until he had. "Well, guess that can't be helped, I think, but don't worry, we won't be stuck here for long. Lucy is coming for us, and he will punish those responsible." Luna Lovegood whispered softly, uncaring about those that stared at her, thinking that she'd truly lost it. They probably thought she'd snapped from the trauma and death around her. She ignored them, and just couldn't wait. The end would come for them soon enough. Besides, she snapped years ago. Who is that?" Neville asked shakily, as he drew her out of her thoughts enough to earn a reply. "Our Savior. He will make them pay. Then we can fix everything. We won't be alone, so don't be sad. We'll have Harry with us again, and everything will be different. Just watch the show, Neville, and enjoy," Luna whispered, a calming smile on her face, though a look of evil, yet innocence was in her eyes. It unnerved him greatly, but he just nodded slowly. He had no other idea of what to do anyway. She then turned to the front of the hall, drawing his eyes there as well. At front charge of the group of survivors, Ronald Bilious Weasley walked to the front of them all, Hermione Jane Granger by his side. Ronald shifted his eyes over the group, collecting his few thoughts before speaking out to them. His companion simply looked over the crowd and thought, "Everyone, we have lost good people today, but it's been worth it. We won, and that snake bastard is dead. Harry might have died, but now the world is safe. His sacrifice was necessary no matter how sad it is, and I'm sure he would be proud of all we've done today. We will just have to," Ronald tried to say, before his horrid speech was cut short. As he had spoke, his words had spoken of sadness, but his eyes gleamed with a dark happiness that he'd kept hidden for so long. This was the moment he'd waited 7 years for, after all. They would all get their rewards, the true reason he'd befriended the last Potter, his wealth, one of the many things Potter had held over his head. But he, Ron Weasley, was on top now. It was his turn. His thoughts were scattered, however, when a deep and cold voice cut him off, drawing every eye in the hall to its source. A man now stood before them. If you could call it that. No, it wasn't. That boy hadn't needed to die, but you're right, Weasley. It is better this way. Because now I can give you what you truly deserve. Prepare to be punished for your sins. A deep, sickening voice said, drawing their attention to a creature that appeared in front of the redhead. The creature stood like a man, had red reptilian skin, wings, and long goat-like horns. Blood-red armor covered almost inch of the creature's body, giving it an almost robotic appearance, only ruined by a solid black robe. The man looked to all like a murderer, a monster, a horror, a Dementor's worst nightmare, a true vision of death, an unholy appearance, a beautiful disaster, the first of the dark, the devil himself. Every assumption would sadly be right, as he was all in one horrific form, come to bring vengeance on the arrogant. All of you will pay, but you You first, Weasley. Lord Lucifer of Hell bellowed loudly, thrusting a long black blade through Ronald's throat, utterly ruining it. In seconds, every bone was pulverized, the jugular going with it, as the blade flew through the back of his neck. Before the ginger could even react, Lucifer pulled the barbed blade to him, ripping the entirety of the boy's throat out gruesomely. The action created a horrific wet sound, and caused many screams of fear. A.'s blood continued to shoot out of the wound, causing dark red to fly through the air. This one moment scarred every Weasley as the beloved boy fell to the cracked stone floor, and Hermione Granger, as her dear boyfriend, gave her a sweet gift. Scarlet droplets. The body count rose by one more. Unknown to them all, many more would join the count by first dawn, of which it would be the brightest. The devil had come to play, and they would all play his game. Harry Potter was not to blame. Over the decades past that day, many blamed Harry Potter for the horror that happened. Some honest few blamed the ones responsible for Harry's state before he died by Tom Riddle's hand. The day Harry died, the day the war was won, was a day hardly talked about. The survivors would speak of the horrors that had taken place in the Great Hall, and what had happened. The corpse once known as Ronald Weasley fell to the ground, the sound causing a chuckle to emerge from Lucifer. The chuckle grew louder when he heard and felt the sensation of several rapid-fire killing curses. Paying them no mind, Lucifer grabbed the redhead's body and channeled his energy into it. The group gasped in horror as the life returned to Ronald Weasley, the blood running out of his neck as he tried to talk. "Hello, Weasley. You're wondering why I brought you back? Simple. It's more fun this way." Lucifer began turning his attention to Hermione Granger, who had her wand aimed at his neck. "Oh, you are brave. I'm not a live child, so I cannot die. I assume you want your punishment first." Lucifer gave her no time to answer, before creating and handing her a long dark gray stone machete, which she was confused about. "Kill him, or I will make the both of you suffer far more than you ever thought you could. Think about it. Him, or you?" Lucifer asked, pushing the resurrected Weasley towards her, the machete aimed in their direction. Her first thought was to attack Lucifer, but she knew that was a death sentence. Or be forced into slavery. After she thought on it, Hermione decided that she only had one logical choice. A human instinct kicked in at that moment, the desire to survive alone, rather than die together. The instinct that normally created killers, or drove simple people insane. The destruction of their sense of domestication. She gave Ronald a deep look, before stabbing the machete through his brain. "Good. You may just survive. I may have use of you," Lucifer muttered in her ear, before moving to his next victim. He turned towards the youngest Weasley, Ginevra. Upon seeing his attention shift to her, she fell and started pleading for her pathetic life. Lucifer had her punishment planned, as he didn't care to manage her soul. Once he stood before her, he snapped, causing her to float in the air. "Poor girl, I won't take your life this day. It's not worth the effort. No, I'll be taking something you needed." Lucifer rumbled out, a grin appearing as Ginevra figured it out. Lucifer merely touched one finger to her stomach, before dropping her to the ground. The girl screamed and cursed at him, but he ignored her. "There you are," Lucifer muttered, as his eyes landed on the widow Weasley. "Molly. Ah, Molly Pruitt, do you miss your brothers?" Lucifer asked, stepping closer, and playing on her sense of long grief lost. "They've mentioned you during their torture sessions. Though I can't make out what they're saying. Did you know they hated your husband? I threw him to them, and they tore him apart. Then again, they haven't been human in a long time. Quite sad, but extremely amusing. Let's see what they'll do to you." "Ooh, maybe Harry will watch this time," Lucifer exclaimed with glee as he snapped once more, the Weasley matriarch disappearing with the sound. "Now, where were we?" Lucifer asked, looking over the group of frightened people. "Ah, I'm done. That was too quick, damn it. Well, I can always torture Hitler later," Lucifer muttered to himself, trying to make himself feel better. His throat ached, as he kept up his evil voice, which he used only when he appeared to humans. He froze suddenly when felt the eyes of a seer on him. He turned to the back of the hall, and saw the Lovegood girl. He'd been surprised when the girl had sacrificed a unicorn to get his attention 2 years before. He hadn't known it at the time, but she had predicted the entire of events that happened. Over the 2 years, she had killed all of the dark children around her and offered their souls to him for favors. He had agreed, but he had not asked for a single thing thus far. He walked to the girl, and was surprised when he saw the ghostly figure with her. Mr. Longbottom, this wasn't your time. Then again, I've been breaking all sorts of rules tonight. What happened? Shot Voldemort in the head, and was killed. Good job and fuck you. Riddle was my pawn. Well, I have Harry now. Lucifer responded, both thankfulness and anger in his voice. Before turning to Luna, Miss Lovegood, I'm guessing you want to cash in those favors of yours. Lucifer said with a grim look. He knew the answer. Yes, I know what you're planning. Take us with you, she said, gesturing between the two of them. We can help, and all my favors can be forgotten by then. All right, but you do know you have to die, correct? He asked, looking warily at her. She nodded with no hesitation. Lucifer just sighed, pressed his index finger on her heart, and waited for her spirit to rise from the body as Neville's had. Oh, that's strange, isn't it? Very strange, the spirit of Luna Lovegood commented as she rose up, and looked at herself, quickly noticing a black hole similar to Neville's. She looked to Lucifer, who just waved it off as nothing. He didn't understand that part himself. Well, I think it's time to go, this place is a bore. Lucifer muttered to the ghosts, made a large black door appear with a swish of his fingers. He then pushed it open for his companions, before following close behind them. The door closing shut loudly behind them. Harry Potter was surrounded by genius. While he wouldn't have chosen the men exactly, they were who he needed. He had been attempting to work, until the men, and a typewriter were ushered into the room. Most of the men Harry had heard of, mainly from history books. They talked between themselves, and mentioned their respective time periods, as they were all from separate ones. They all took interest in Harry's story, as his was the latest. So, 1998, what's the world like without me? The first man asked, a lazy grin on his face. Well, peaceful, but I believe Lucifer referred to it as boring. That's nice, I suppose. What about New York? My boy's still there. I don't know, but they're probably gone. Sorry, Al, Harry told the man, before focusing on the man to their left. You said you're going to travel backwards in time. How? I've done research. I thought only forward was possible. The second Al asked, looking closer at Harry. Albert, we're in hell. The devil himself is going to take me back. Your research is almost useless now. I'm sorry, but science doesn't matter here. Harry apologized to the man, even though he had nothing to do with it. Out of the three of them, Albert seemed to be the one that had the hardest with adjusting to the afterlife. Alphonse had been fully willing to accept hell when he moved on, but Albert had difficulties. Every once in a while, Harry's eyes drifted towards the fourth man at their table. Robert Catesby. He had tried to talk with the man before, but he seemed content with being an observer. As Harry had studied history during his horrible days at Muggle school, he knew somewhat of the man behind the gunpowder plot. He'd hoped the man would have some knowledge to share regarding his mission, but so far he'd been silent. After it was brought in, Harry had looked over the typewriter, but it just kept typing out the same sentence over and over, loudly. After the 15-page fell out, Al knocked it off the table. Yeah, Jack, you're a dull boy, shut the fuck up. The ex-mobster growled, before collecting himself, straightening his hat in the process. So Harry, what do you have planned on the schedule so far? Harry thought about it before answering. Well, I'm going to do almost the exact opposite of what I did last time. Make changes when I think they're needed, and prevent some things from happening. That seems like a fine idea, Mr. Potter, but what will you do if something goes wrong? Albert asked, knowing that a plan never survives the battlefield. I will stun and obliviate anyone that's nearby, and see if Lucifer will help. Harry said, unsure as he hadn't put thought in what to do in that situation. You and your funny words again. What happens if Lucy can't help ya? Al asked, making Harry think more on what to do in such a case. Then, I train and learn. I'm betting you guys would help with that. Harry asked the two contributing spirits, hoping they'd be willing. Sure. Don't have much better to do. Al told him, Albert just nodding in agreement. This was the most excitement they'd had in decades. As they finished up any last ideas about Harry's plan, he made to leave, only to be stopped. Robert had taken a hold of his arm, and looked him in the eyes. And said the only words Harry had and would ever heard from him. Whatever you do, never get caught. Welcome to hell, Lucifer yelled in a dramatic fashion. He'd actually been excited for this, as he didn't get much in the sense of visitors. The young ghosts merely followed in his stead. Neville Longbottom was amazed and horrified, not by the events that had occurred to him, resulting in his death, but by everything he'd learned since then. Harry was alive, or as alive as they were. Everything he'd been taught about the origin of mankind was wrong, and there was such a thing as a devil. He'd encountered ghosts plenty of times during his years at Hogwarts, but he'd never known where they came from. The environment of hell was amazing to him as well. Whenever people had spoke of the horrifying land of hell, they described it as similar to a volcano, dark and fiery. What he'd witnessed so far put that thought far from his mind. He loved the little things in the new world, the differences from Earth. And just the place itself. The different sky, different grass, just the foreign feeling he got from the place. He might as well have been on an alien planet, that was how out of place he felt. But it didn't put him down. He wanted to learn. Neville let out a mere cough, and caught up to the two, and let Lucifer continue his tour. He pointed out many important places in his realm, monuments, storefronts, and his palace. When they took a turn, and approached a hotel of sorts, Neville got curious. Lord Devil, is there a way for us to not be ghost-like? I'd enjoy walking again, Neville asked, trying to be as courteous as he could. He hoped his nobility lessons his Gram had forced on him would pay off. Just call me Lucifer, everyone's calling me that again. Yes, I can make you human-like, you'll breath, and be close to human. The exception is you'll only be like that here, well until I send you back. Then you'll be human, again, Lucifer said, before waving his hand over the two of them. This will hurt a bit, sorry. Immediately after he put his hand down, Neville convulsed in pain. He could feel his flesh appear, and start weaving together to form organs, muscle, tissue, and skin. He felt blood appear out of nowhere and fill veins that had appeared as well. After he became solid, he painfully felt bones form, and twist his body back into their regular shape. After 40 seconds, he could see, as his eyes were recreated. He felt his heart form out of nothing and connect to his veins, and his brain form afterwards. He screamed S receptors were connected from his new brain, to essential parts of his body. After that the lesser parts of his body reformed, leaving him complete and new. Once his recreation was finished, he felt the hard concrete of the ground. Before he suddenly felt fabric cover him. Infused with a strange source of energy, Neville sprang to his feet, and noticed he was clothed in new clothing. Gone was his tattered sweater and jeans, now replaced by a golden-colored windbreaker, dark brown cargo pants, and combat boots. What he hadn't realized, once again he was dressed for war. After taking in his appearance, he noticed the change in Luna. She looked the exact same as before, except with blue highlights in her hair, occupied by an azure sundress. He'd later find her outfit ironic, as there was no sun in hell. So, are you ready to see Harry yet? I'm sure he's got bored with the rogue gallery by now, Lucifer said, gesturing them towards the hotel, before holding the door, which seemed determined to squish them to a pulp. He directed them towards the main elevator, nodding to the skeletal receptionist before following them into the elevator. Neville just squeezed in with the two, and watched. Head in silence as Lucifer pressed a button that wasn't listed. They all waited in awkward silence, as the elevator made its climb up the building, which took much longer than he expected. After a minute, he was already sick of the elevator music, and was prepared to destroy the speaker when the elevator opened. They stepped out into an impossibly long hallway, which reminded Neville of something, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Lucifer led them past lines of white doors, before stopping at a solid black oak door. There was the usual numbering on the door, announcing it as room 13. That's so cliché, Luna said, knowing the symbolism behind the number, and the superstition behind it. Let me guess, you bought Harry a black cat as well. That's a good idea, it might make him compliant. It would also give him training in how to disturb people. Lucifer said thoughtfully, making a mental list of places in hell where he could come across a cat. Putting that aside, he opened the door for the two. Harry, you have company. Harry Potter was happy, somewhat. He had a link to his old life, in the form of Neville and Luna. He was proud of Neville's story, and was surprised at the use of a rifle. As he hadn't thought of it, he was slightly disturbed by Luna's story, mainly the part involving a unicorn. It brought back some memories of Voldemort's wraith. After hearing it all, and learning what had happened in his world, he didn't care really. He had friends, and what seemed to be the few loyal ones he had left. He'd been angry of course when he learned of Lucifer's punishment. But knew that was done with. He was disturbed that Hermione just killed Ron when threatened, but he probably is. Bloody hell guys, do you think Ron's down here? Harry asked the two teens beside him. They had been sitting atop the edge of the otherworldly hotel, and staring at the unnatural night, and counting stars when he had the thought. They had learned an interesting thing while in hell. They literally couldn't die. All the imp had explained on Harry's first day, his soul could be sucked out, but besides that, death didn't affect him. He'd even jumped off the hotel at one point to prove it. In hell, I'd bet the world on that, Neville said with a snort, even though he'd watched Ronald be killed, brutally at that, he knew in a small part about Ronald's betrayal, and he felt hurt by it. Though Hermione had been his first friend, it had been Harry that had branched out to him, and invited him to join his group. He owed Harry for helping him become who he was today. Ronald had always seemed jealous of him, as if Neville would replace him as Harry's best mate. He'd even confronted him in 5th year, telling him to lay off, and go find his toad. Well, he'd left the toad behind, and Ron seemed to leave his neck behind. I can see him, he's in the 9th circle. It's very amusing. He's drowning, but can't die. Luna said, her tone both amused and morbid. It had taken them both a small while to adapt to what seemed to be the real Luna. The personality Luna had before seemed to be a dulled down version of her normal self. She still had a dreamy aspect to her, but seemed more grounded to reality. She didn't speak of creatures, that part seemed to be replaced by what they had come to know as her seer side. I wonder if Lucifer will let us pay him a visit. I've got a bone to pick with him, Neville said with a chuckle, following Harry as they entered the elevator. He smiled slightly. He had removed the speaker in the elevator the night before. They hadn't chosen to leave immediately. They'd decided to relax a small bit, as they had just come from a stressful war. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Luce is all about punishment, Luna added cheerfully, humming what seemed to be a funeral march under her breath. Well, let's go ask him then, Harry proposed as they exited the elevator, and headed for the lobby doors which still had a grudge against them, and had seemed to have grown razor-sharp teeth. It seems he's busy, but not too much, Luna muttered, as she looked in what they assumed was the direction of Lucifer's palace. Harry and Neville merely shrugged once again, as she informed them of otherwise impossible knowledge. Thanks Luna, Harry muttered, thankful in a way. You're welcome Harry, my lord. I know that this is your stress relief time, but Potter and his friends are here for counsel, the advisor muttered to his lord, hoping that he wouldn't have to sew his head back on later. The boy had arrived, and the advisor had been forced to interrupt his lord. Harry is here, all right, Lucifer said, leaving the room he'd been in, only to hear a stream of German swears shoot in his direction. Adolf, don't you fucking move, I'm busy, and if you leave or take that dress off. Another pineapple is going up there, Lucifer threatened, pulling a pineapple out of nowhere. Ja Meister, called a weak voice. Good, where's Harry? Lucifer asked, focusing once more on his advisor. The advisor waited until Lucifer finished pressing his suit, before answering. Throne room, they wish to torture Ronald Weasley. Oh, pineapple time, and torture. Is Elohim coming later on to let me chop his head off? Lucifer asked, spiked smile on his face. No, damn, Lucifer muttered, before heading to meet with his favorite subject, and grant him access to the circle. That's Ron, Harry Potter asked, looking down at the skinny blue redhead under the ice. Lucifer had dropped them off at the 9th circle, the circle dedicated to those guilty of treachery. The punishment, he explained, was to be trapped underwater, and held under by ice. What remained of Ronald Weasley was a thin, blue skeleton with a wisp of red hair. Ronald Bilious Weasley, that is correct, Lucifer answered, watching the boy struggle under the ice. Why doesn't he quit? Neville muttered, standing atop the spot Ronald was under. Ronald seemed so far gone that he didn't recognize a single one of them, his only focus being to break free from the icy depths. He can't. His mind is broken, the only thing keeping him alive is his desire to be warm, thus he can't give up, as when he does, he dies. In hell, if you die, you come back. He literally can never stop. He does, he ends up right back here. Luna explained, smirking as Ronald started smashing his head against the bloodstained ice. I don't think we need to do anything else, Harry said, watching his once friend endure eternal torture. Yes we do, we can never do enough. He benefited and looked forward to your death, Harry. If he could, he'd have killed you himself. He never was your friend. Luna sputtered in anger, outraged that Harry was showing sympathy to someone who would never return it to him. Harry, she's right, you know she is, so just give it up. I think we're done here, let's go find Lucifer, Neville said, grabbing the Raven by the shoulder and directing him towards the large ship they arrived on. It apparently was this circle's equivalent to the main Stilts ship, but belonged to the greatest pirate anyone had heard of. Yar, I be setting off soon, mateys. Let us set sail to Old Roger's domain. Edward Teach yelled at them from atop his ship, waving them over. We're coming, Captain, Harry yelled, jogging up the plank with his friends, leaving the icy remains of the first traitor behind. Good night, my council, I have news to announce. I have chosen my lord. Who are your chosen Hellsetters? The incubus, Montnert, asked, wanting to warn his troops to not attempt any actions on his lord's chosen. Harry James Potter, Neville Joel Longbottom, and Lunar Jacqueline Lovegood, 1990s. Lucifer asked, his tone advising every creature present to avoid each team, the consequence being terrifying. Have they been trained, my lord? Zetodat, his general asked, utter respect in his voice. No, but you, your men, and Harry's chosen council will be assisting them. Yes, my lord. Excuse my curiosity, my lord, but to which times will you need to be delivering them to my lord? Aramar, the time stand asked, wondering if he'd have to solve any possible events regarding their arrival times. 1985, 1987, 1990 respectfully. Any other questions? Lucifer asked them, widely ignored at the waste of time, but appreciative that his council were considerate to his charges. They each stayed in silence, so Lucifer concluded their meeting, each of them leaving for their respective places of control. Lucifer headed to his chambers, looking forward to his next venture, and maintaining his plan's ideas. He had the framework complete, and was finalizing any last thoughts. He took a moment to think over any possible outcomes as well. At a last sudden thought, he decided to work on a way to conceal their progress from Elohim's prying eyes as well. Can't have God popping in to ruin everything, now can you? God, the Potters won't stop trying to attack me, could you order them to stop? Albus Dumbledore basically screamed at his creator, his tone like that of an arrogant kindergartner, and much like that of the youngest Malfoy. Elohim, or God, instead ground his teeth at the man. He regretted dearly his decision to take the man, as the man spent more time badgering him than Adam. He actually wondered to himself, what would have happened if he'd kept the youngest Potter, but quit that thought quickly. Elohim had known Lucifer for many years, and he knew his old friend would never give a soul back. After thinking sadly about the decision, he turned back the man he hated. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, I've encouraged them. They hate you, and frankly, I myself have started to hate you. Now, go and sit in your Hogwarts, and leave the Potters and I alone. Or do you want to move downstairs? I'm sure Harry will give you a very warm welcoming. Quote, Elohim asked the man. A grin very similar to that of his counterpart graced his face. Dumbledore shook in fear, before muttering an apology and leaving Elohim's palace. After the bearded man left, Elohim sat back in his chair. I think that man's turning me off beards. I wonder where my shaver is. I don't believe I've seen it since. 1. Elohim sighed, and ran his hand through his beard. I wonder if Jesus has one I can use. I might have to go down there and ask him. What does him call himself this century? Norris or something? Never mind it. With that, Elohim changed his appearance slightly, and shifted himself to earth. Elohim now stood in front of a large ranch, with a field of crops, a barn, and a simple 3-story farmhouse. Elohim walked down the long path to the home, before reaching the house. He knocked a few times before a tall blonde woman answered. Can I help you? The woman asked him skeptically, looking closer at him. I've come to talk to Mr. Norris, Elohim stated, wondering who the woman before him was. Great. A fan, she said with contempt, before looking at something within the house. Honey, another one of your fans here. After several moments, a grizzled-looking man walked over, and took her place. Thanks, Jenna. How can I help? Why? Father, the man asked in shock, staring at Elohim. Hello, my son. I was wondering if I could borrow your shaver. Chuck, who is this man? The woman asked her husband, slightly afraid of the stranger. Her husband's father, Ray, was supposed to be dead. This is my father. Now was the time. Lucifer had gone after the three once they woke up. As today was the day he'd send them back. Many would think he could just send back anytime, just because he was the devil, but it wasn't true. He could affect reality and death, he couldn't control everything. There were many different controlling figures throughout their universe, and Lucifer and Elohim were just two. Lucifer controlled the aspect of death, and the transfer of souls from one dimension to another. He was able to decide the punish of the living and dead. Elohim handled creation, and decided the morals and rules of humans. Aramar was the time stand, and controlled a majority of time itself. Lucifer could create preparations to send them back, but Aramar's approval was absolutely necessary. Lucifer could travel between dimensions and time using the doors of being, which were created when a different devil was created from a different religion. The one he mainly used to travel forwards in time was known as the Mirai door, which formed when he was introduced in Japanese mythology. He had problems controlling his different forms every once in a while, and would end up switching between them randomly. Whenever he was around humans, he mostly took on his Christian form. Though he was starting to like his human form as well. Though he wasn't around Elohim very often, he guessed the big guy shared his problem, as he knew Elohim had turned into the Buddha once when he visited Nepal. Turning his attention back to his Hellsetters, he continued his trip to the otherworldly, and to their missions. He had worked with Aramar on what to change to achieve the timeline he wanted. His original plan had been to send them all to 1991 to meet up at their school, but he'd figured that there were too many problems with that. Longbottom had been too physically impaired to meet many of the problems they'd face, and would take time to adjust to the standards he'd need. Lovegood was a year younger than the two, and wouldn't be able to attend their school at the same time as the other two. Harry had been too weak by 91 feet, and had been restricted by the old fool, causing his magic to be reduced. Lucifer would need him strong. He thought up many different things he'd need to change in order to get them where he needed them, and how he needed them. Reluctantly, he decided they'd need to be sent to different times, and meet up later on. He had collected Harry on his way, and had quickly grabbed the other two before bringing them back to his throne room. He called his and Harry's council to discuss the plan he'd decided on. Lucy, I don't like your plan, Luna had said, right as they entered the throne room. Lucifer chose not to say something like, I didn't say it yet, as he knew the girl was a seer. She probably heard his thoughts at that very moment. Lucifer, Harry asked, looking at him to explain what had the seer so uneasy. All right, this is it. I told Harry here a while back about the first plan if I let him redo everything, but things have changed. To make everything work properly, I'll need to send each of you to separate years, where you'll make certain changes, then meet up in 1991. To keep you on the right track, and tell you what you need to do. I'll assign you each a guide who will keep with you and train you. Lucifer explained to them, as he gestured to the three spirits Harry had met during the meeting Lucifer had set up before. Harry nodded at the three, and received a greeting from them. Lucifer walked towards the three dead teens, to continue his explanation. I can explain to each of you separately your own missions if you'd like. Lucifer offered, only to receive negatives in the process. They didn't care really. All right then, Harry, I will be sending you back to 1985, where you'll be 6 again. Yes, you'll be back with those disgusting relatives of yours, but things will be drastically different, Lucifer said, before turning to Neville. Longbottom, I'll be sending you back to 1987, where you'll be 8 once more. Your grandmother won't be as overbearing as before, and you'll have Robert Catesby, Lucifer said, gesturing to the ghost behind him. And his genius to guide you. Neville nodded at this. He was sure he could do well in whatever Lucifer asked of him. Upon seeing Neville's determination, Lucifer turned to Luna, who was looking extensively at the ceiling. After getting her attention, Lucifer explained to her what would change. Lovegood, I'll be sending you to 1990. You are to ready yourself quickly, and find the two of them. They both should be ready by then. Just so you know, I persuaded your parents to have you a year before so you'll be of equal age with the two, and be able to accompany them to Hogwarts. Besides that, you don't have much to worry about. Make sure your mother doesn't do that experiment, and ensure you get into the same house as them. Mr. Einstein will helping you with your task. Luna nodded at this. She could do this. After looking over the three, Lucifer was satisfied. They were ready. Harry. After Lucifer's meeting, Harry had retired to room 13 to wait until the time Lucifer had referred to as Silver Night. While every single day was in a constant black night. Lucifer had mentioned that once every 7 months, there was a single night where the overbearing night turned silver. Lucifer had said T.S. was the ideal time for temporal travel, or something. After a few hours of watching some strange shows on the television, and making himself lunch in the room, Al Capone showed up to lead him out to some weird tall building. As they walked up to it, Harry looked over the strange building. It was more like a tower now that he saw it. It was strangely the only building inside hell not made from the dark black stone that the rest were. On the front of it hung some sort of hourglass, filled to the brim with glowing black sand. The two of them entered the building at a brisk pace, and made their way through several slim hallways, until they emerged into a marble-white circular room. The room was made up in an official, well-done manner, and was very impressive in the way it was built. The room was relatively empty besides 3 doors that somehow stood in the center of the room. Harry and Al walked towards the first of the 3, and waited, carrying on a conversation about how to get away with murder to pass the time. After an hour, they were joined by Neville and Luna, along with their ghostly escorts. After another hour, and several awkward conversations between the 6, a lanky, bearded man walked into the room calmly, before coming to a close next to them. Ah, Silver Night already. I thought so. Well, a door for you each, to each your own times. Mr. Potter gets the first, Longbottom the second, and Miss Lovegood the third. I don't really have much to say really. If I have need to contact you, I will do so through your guides. Good night, Aramar the Timestead said, before leaving them. Just as quick as he had come. The teens merely shrugged at the treatment, before stepping to their respective doors. Harry looked to his friends, and saw they matched his exact emotions. Determination, willing, brave, excited, and worried. They were all willing to do whatever it took to change the world, so that the world they had come from never existed. The 3 were excited as well, to start a new journey, and work to bend the world to Lucifer and their own whims. They were also worried, as even though they had help, they worried about failing. They didn't know what would come next, as this seemed to be their last chance. He was determined to show Lucifer that he chose the right person for his offer. Of course, at a later point in his life, Harry Potter would be as ked why he'd accepted the devil's offer to turn Earth into a new hell. He would simply tell them, Earth had already been his hell. Why not let others feel the heat too? Harry, July 31, 1985. Wake up, boy. A loud shrill voice yelled in the house, pulling Harry out of his deep sleep. As he opened his eyes, He took in his surroundings and groaned in frustration and slight relief. He took in his surroundings and groaned in frustration and slight relief. I'm back. Yep kid, you're back in this hellhole. But we're not putting up with their shit. We're stopping their stupid asses now. Al said, floating next to Harry's small bed. How are going to stop them? You're a ghost, and I have no wand. Well, we got another option. I'm your mentor, and I know about something you can do. Ya see Harry, was a mobster. So I know how to kill people. I happen to know your uncle has something in his possession we can use. The shotgun. The shotgun. Al said, grinning a broad grin. We got to wait till tonight though. Alright, I can wait. Neville. January 1st, 1987. Neville, you have lessons today, get up. A voice Neville recognized as his grandmother called out in the manor loudly, causing him to wake up. Neville sat up then, swinging his legs off of the bed, before heading for his wardrobe. After dressing, he looked around his old room. After living a life as a teenager, his childhood room irritated him. Do not despair, Lord Longbottom, there will be time to adjust things later. We must attend to your grandmother. Robert Catesby said in a neutral tone as he appeared beside him. It matters not, Lord Longbottom, we have much time to fix things. All right then, let's go, Robert. Right away, let us go. The ghost said, leading the way for Neville, straight to the kitchen. Ah Neville, took you long enough. Come on now, you have noble lessons today. Augusta Longbottom said, pulling out a portkey. Normally Neville would be annoyed by his grandmother, but she had been the one to give him the rifle. Which helped out greatly. Yes Gran. Luna. January 1st, 1990. Luna love, time for breakfast. Her mother yelled out for her, though she had already been awake. She practically flew down the stairs, before sitting at their dining table, eager to see the one person she missed the most. In the kitchen, her mother was cooking away at something, though she still talked with them. Luna almost cried at the sight of her mother, but held it in. Luna, have you interfered with the current path of time? Xenophilius asked his daughter, looking at her face in a concerned manner. Pandora also looked over at her. She wondered what happened to cause time travel being needed. I have, father. I've come from 10 years into the future, where my friend was betrayed by several people. And Lucifer came and killed them, Luna said, in her now known to be false dreamy voice. She wasn't even concerned with her parents knowing. Luna, is there anything we should know about the future? Her mother asked, sitting down with the two of them. Mother dies 2 months from now. You were experimenting with a new spell of yours, and died from the blastback. Father, you died a few days before I did. You mentioned Lucifer, as in the devil. Her father asked, slightly scared at the news. Yeah, but don't worry. Lucy is nice. He took me and my friend Neville to our friend Harry. He also sent the 3 of us back in time, and edited the timeline to make everything work right. Luna explained, walking over to the kitchen to resume her mother's cooking. Okay then, Xenophilius said, almost instantly over the news. He already knew that life is strange. He just considered this one more thing on the list of strange things about it. Harry, okay, we know where the shotgun is, but the gun case is locked. What now? Harry asked the Spectre, as Al seemed to have all the answers. Well, if we get it out, an alarm will go off. Another thing is, you're too weak to lift it, and the recoil from it would probably kill you. I do know something we can try though. Lucifer told me another one of your funny words. Al said, leaving Harry curious to the word. A spell. Which one? I believe he called it Impero. Al said, before moving his move in the wand pattern the spell would require. But I don't have a wand. Lucy knew you wouldn't have one, and if he was right. You have a birthday gift waiting for you in the cupboard. Happy 6th birthday, Harry, Al exclaimed, patting Harry on the back, though it didn't do anything really, as his hand just sank into Harry's back. After giving a quick thanks, Harry walked to the cupboard and was surprised. The entire cupboard was decorated in birthday decorations, and was topped off with a large cupcake and a single present box. Oh wow, Harry muttered, as he quickly took a chomp out of the cupcake, before grabbing the box. On the top sat a note written on very expensive stationery. Happy birthday, Harry. Enjoy blasting the fuck out of people. Your beloved devil, Lucifer. After reading and placing the note aside, he took the wrappings off the box and opened it. In the center of the box, a single wand sat on a dark wooden stand. The wand was made of a white shade of wood, and had strange bumps along the sides of it. On the handle of the wand was what seemed to be a crude grip hold made of black leather. Harry picked the wand up and waved it. To his surprise, it created a blindingly bright light. "Nox," he loudly muttered, causing the light to disappear. He very much enjoyed the wand, as it infueled I am with a strange sense of strength and power. What kind of wand is this? No clue, but he said you'll find a future version of it when 1991 comes by. Al explained the best he could, as Lucifer hadn't told him much about it. As he didn't know much about it himself. "What? Never mind, let's go," Al said, leading them into the hall once more. "You said we'd need to use the Imperius, what are we doing?" "You're too weak to use a shotgun, but there's a perfectly capable man in this house, who with a little bit of that spell, will be oh so willing to help out," Al said with a twisted grin. "What do I tell him to do? Tell him to drink a little bit of alcohol, shoot his wife and son, hit you with the butt of his shotgun, shoot the ground next to ya, and finally to shoot himself," Al said, making motions for each job. "Why? So the police will think he got drunk, killed them, tried to kill you, then killed himself. It's all too easy to fool the coppers," Al said, leading the way to Vernon and Petunia's room. "Quiet now, you don't want to say a word, unless it's to control the fat bastard. Before you ask, they can't hear me." Harry nodded at his words, and crept up to the bed. Vernon and his wife were both sleeping soundly, and loudly. Harry silently snuck right up to Vernon's right side, pointed his wand at the man's large head, and whispered, "Imperio." At this, Vernon's eyes opened and glazed over. "Follow me, Vernon. You need a drink, don't you?" Neville. After his lessons ends, Neville returned home with the portkey his grandmother had left him. Almost immediately, he made his way through the manor and headed to his room to consult with Robert. "Ah, Lord Longbottom, I was drawing up the plans we'll need to complete," Robert muttered, writing on a glowing, transparent chalkboard. On it were the following objectives: get into a healthy, fit lifestyle. Prove to your family that you have magical talent. Show that you are smart. All right, how long do you think this will take? Neville asked his ghostly companion, wanting his input. The required time truly depends on yourself and the circumstances around you, Robert muttered once more, turning towards the 6-year-old with a wise look on his features. All right, how do we get this done without people becoming suspicious? Neville asked, knowing that they'd have to be careful with their mission. Are there opportunities where you interact with other children? Yes. Choose a child you do not like, I'll alter their memories, and you tell your grandmother that the child mocked you because of your weight, and that you want to get in shape, Robert suggested, making Neville wonder what else his guide could do. Can all ghosts do that? Not all of us. It depends on how long we've been deceased. I've been dead since the 16th century, so I have obtained a large variety of abilities. A colleague of mine, Alphonse Capone, has only been dead for 40 years too. This point of time, and ONLY has a small array of abilities compared to mine, Robert explained, demonstrating some of his own powers. He turned fully invisible, changed colors, became corporeal, and controlled the furniture inside Neville's bedroom in a manner similar to ghosts inside of horror films. Impressive, indeed, Robert said, giving the hint of a smile as well. He didn't get to show off often. Luna, so Miss Lovegood, what would our next move be? Albert Einstein asked the small blonde beside him. She had gone up to the roof of her home, dangling her legs off the edge. Well, Lucy didn't give me much to. All I have to do is get ready, save my mum, and meet the boys at the station, Luna said, staring off into the distance. She was playing a game with herself, to see how many of her father's creatures she could find, and then identify them correctly as monsters from Lucifer's domain. All right then, I assume I'm not needed at the moment. Nope. Go relax, Bert, Luna said, ignoring the face Albert made at the nickname. Fine, if I must, the ghost muttered, possessing several of Luna's books in order to read them. I must say you have a terrible collection of literature. Oh, those are father's, my books are in the closet, Luna muttered, leaving Albert to discover a pile of books that would make a priest die of fright. When Harry awoke once more, he was in what he could tell was A.M. Uggle Hospital by the instruments that littered it. He rubbed at his new bruise and bandage on the right side of his forehead. In case you wondered, everything went perfectly. The neighbors came when they heard gunshots, and found what seemed to be the body of a drunk Vernon Dursley who shot and killed his wife and son in a drunken fit of rage. Because of the hit on your forehead, and the shotgun blast on the carpet. They assumed he meant to shoot you, but he shot the floor instead. Our plan worked, Al said in what passed as excitement, and was laid down on the hospital bed besides his. Don't speak either, they're listening. Everything's fine, and they're going to release you in a few days, but they're still trying to find a person to send ya to. Don't worry about your wand, I call Ed up Lucy and he's holding onto it for us. Harry nodded at this, and relaxed once more. He tried to fall back to sleep, and it came easily. The hit to the head made sleeping easy. Harry, July 30th, 1991. Well done, kid. You're becoming a better shot than most of my boys were. Hell, maybe even me. Al Capone said in rare compliment, as he observed his protege working away at his craft. Harry Potter just grinned at this, and continued at his training. Loud bangs were heard throughout Privet Drive, the sound of hundreds of letters being ripped apart as Harry used up several round drums of shots into the falling letters. After one emptied, Harry unnaturally, and quickly shifted two handfuls of bullets from his coat into the waiting drum, and continued firing. After almost every letter lay shot to shreds on the front lawn. Harry stood back and admired his newly formed confetti. He smirked at this, and returned his Tommy gun to its sling on his back. You have to admit, stealing my gun back was worth it. Al said to his charge, feeling proud that the boy had accomplished so much with just a bit of help, and some good guns. He had broken into the home of a rich man that had bought Al's gun a few decades back. But they hadn't expected the man to be packing extreme heat. Harry had managed to kill the old coot, but he gotten a direct ticket back to hell in the process. Lucifer had to send him right back there. Stomach restored, and blood refilled. Beats dying insane inside crazy, fucking, haunted Alcatraz. Al responded sarcastically to Harry's comment. Harry just ignored him, as he had heard his sob story before, and it didn't affect him anymore. He'd prefer it to the feeling of getting stuffed with bullets, and slowly, and painfully bleeding out. He returned to his walk with purpose. Once he reached the far end of the property, he bent down and picked up the single remaining letter. He had left one letter in suitable condition, so he'd have one to use. Let me guess, you got the once-in-a-lifetime chance to go to an elite wizarding school in Greater Scotland? Al sarcastically asked, as he let a lazy grin move onto his face. Yep, guess what, you're a wizard, Harry. Harry said with a dark laugh, as he crumpled the letter into a ball. Let's go get a drink, Al. Oh wait, you can't. Fucking chip off the old block, aren't ya, Harry? It's all your fault. Neville, July 30th, 1991. Neville dear, your Hogwarts letter arrived, Augusta Longbottom yelled from some part of the manor, alerting Neville to the need for action. Neville and Robert C.A. Tesby had planned out exactly what they'd do when the letter arrived, and it seemed it was time. Over the 6 years they had, Neville had restored some of his muscle and tone from the previous timeline. Though he was still the height of a child, which irritated him. He had also, accidentally, performed an easy act of magic, which saved him from the horrid window test. After getting motivated out of nowhere, he also advanced in his schoolings. Though he didn't do too well, he still had to maintain his cover. Neville and the Catholic ghost bounded down the tall main staircase of Longbottom Manor's hall, and to the dining room. Augusta awaited him in the middle of the room, and handed him the letter after he greeted her. I should be able to take you down to Diagon Alley tomorrow, or I guess you could go with one of the elves. Just to be supervised, Augusta suggested, as she trusted her grandson, and the security of the alley, despite the still present population of Death Eaters. She knew they wouldn't dare pull anything major with their lord dead. I'll get Jadki to flash me over to the alley. I should be fine once I get there, and if anything did happen, I have the emergency portkey. Neville said, reassuring his worried grandmother. After he took control of his life more, and became serious, she displayed a great deal of attention and worry towards him. Robert had informed him 2 years after his arrival that she was reminded of Frank when he was serious, and it saddened her, and made her fear losing him as well. "All right. Just be safe," she warned, attempting to intimidate him, only to fail miserably as she was too mopey to pull a scary face. "Always Gran," Neville said with a quick hug, before heading to find the house elf he had said he'd use. Yes, Robert could teleport him, and he still retained his ability to apparate. He just wanted to maintain his cover in case his grandmother asked the elf. After finding the specific elf, and explaining the situation, Neville found himself heading to the alley, knowing that he would be alone no longer. They both knew young Mr. Potter would be there, waiting for them most likely. So, to the alley they went, in their search for the first Hellsetter. "Harry, hello Mr. Longbottom, care for a drink? Lucifer's paying," Harry offered to his friend, who had just arrived at the Leaky Cauldron. Harry had intimidated the bar man, Tom, into serving him fire whiskey. All he had done was shoot the ceiling and the cowardly man obeyed. Harry received his drink after it, which he drank gladly. The entire time, Al watched him in slight anger, as he hated the fact of death even more than he did before. "Harry, why are you getting drunk?" Neville asked his friend, joining him at his table, and grabbing the offered bottle. "Why not? I honestly don't care about getting anything in the alley, besides Hedwig, and perhaps a stop by Gringotts. Lucifer said he could provide better supplies for Hogwarts than the alley can provide, so I'm holding to that." "Why are you his favorite?" Neville asked his friend, not even thinking about how messed up being the devil's favorite was. "I don't know. Maybe it's my good looks." "You don't think Lucifer is?" Quote. Neville asked the Raven, looking around as if the entity would show up to confront them. "No bloody idea, but he is a bit flamboyant." "That's true. So, Hedwig then, let's go get your owl," Neville said, standing from the table to walk away, though he brought along the bottle of fire whiskey. "Yeah, I can't just leave her here this time, she was my best friend." "I get it mate, besides, I want to get a pet myself." "No toads this time," Neville said with a laugh, wondering what made him hang on to Trevor after his great-uncle Algie had bought him. He was thinking of getting a cat, or something else like it. He was sure he could find some animal at Magical Menagerie, as he knew they had a wide variety of animals from the last timeline, as that was where his uncle had gotten Trevor from. "Good on you, toads are fucking stupid." "Wow Hedwig, you're fucking creepy now," Harry said in shock upon setting his eyes on his former pet. Hedwig looked mostly the same. Still the same snowy owl, but had disturbing, glowing red eyes replacing her old golden ones. "Yeah, it's me, Harry. Been 6 years, but I'm back," Harry muttered, rubbing his owl's feathered head. "Ah, I see you've taken a liking to Snowy. Here, would you care to take her home?" the clerk asked him, guiding him over to the register. Harry nodded at this, and proceeded to purchase his avian friend, which he was glad about, even though she seemed slightly demonic. After getting Hedwig settled inside her new cage, Harry headed out of the shop, and made his way to the menagerie, where Neville had headed before. They split up. Strangely, Al had abandoned him for the moment, claiming he needed to speak with Lucifer over a problem he noticed. Harry shrugged it off, and continued his venture towards his human friend. After arriving at the large, windowed shop, Harry entered and searched throughout the store for the brunette boy. After a few minutes, Harry found his friend over by the feline section, and found him holding a very familiar puffy, orange kitten. The small kitten squirmed slightly in Neville's arms, before settling down. The kitten had a small collar around its neck, that read in red, "Dangerous." And under it was a simple name that Harry couldn't read. Even though the name wasn't readable, Harry would recognize the rabid cat anywhere. "Oh, hey Harry, meet my little friend here. His name is Crookshanks," Neville said cheerfully, holding the evil cat towards him to see. "Of course, the devil would make us find the devil cat." Quote, Luna honey, your letter has arrived. Do you need a lift to Diagon Alley?" Pandora Lovegood asked her daughter, who was quietly reading from a small, black leather-bound book, and utterly ignoring the newly arrived letter. "No thanks. Lucy will supply everything I need, I've already seen it," Luna said mystically, and continued silently reading from the tome. All right. Carry on reading then. I'm just going to work on my latest assignment, Pandora said, slowly getting used to the idea of her daughter interacting with the ruler of hell. All right then. Forget the squid mother, it didn't matter. Luna said, knowing her mother still was traumatized at times from the experience. I know. Quote, Hellsetters. September 1st. Hello boys, how have the 6 years been? Luna asked her friends once she met up with them at King's Cross Station. She was very happy seeing her friends once again, as Lucifer had instructed that she was to wait to meet up with them, as it wasn't too long for her. Eventful. Stole Al's gun back, got shot to death, became a marksman, and overall became a badass, Harry said, showing them Al's gun, which he had disillusioned from Muggle eyes. Stopped being fat, and proved I was smart. Planned out my 6 years. And bought a cat, Neville explained, finishing it off by showing Crookshanks to Luna. His name is Crookshanks. Oh, I can't believe this. Wonder what bushy bitch is going to get this time. Luna wondered aloud, picturing Hermione with a toad this time. It was a very amusing thought to her. No clue, but I don't care. Harry muttered, 6 years later and the betrayal still stung. Though it was greatly muted. What? Neville asked the two, completely obvious to the fact he bought the other brunette's former cat. Nothing Neville, forget it. All right then, but, I'm wondering who the hell, bushy bitch, is, and I have a strong idea. Neville said to them, in a skeptical tone. He only knew one bitch that was even remotely bushy. You're most likely right, as Harry started to say. Though from the sudden rush of students running for the hidden pillar, they knew they didn't have much time left. I guess it's time. Let them come, I want them to try, Harry said with a toothy grin, as he pulled a thick sawn-off shotgun from his coat. He then cracked it open, slipped a few shells into it, before snapping the gun back together with a satisfying noise coming from it. Al would be proud. Hellsetters. September 1, 1991. All aboard, the conductor yelled as the trio made their way onto the steam train. They were making idle conversation, until they reached the back of the train. Once the three settled down inside a compartment, they put away their things and pets. Their mood wasn't very positive, as they basically waited to be interrupted by the people they hated. Surprisingly, it took a longer amount of time for Ronald to arrive, which gave them a reprieve from his stupidity, that is, until he did arrive. They had been having a small conversation about their plans when the accursed Ginger entered the compartment. Why, you're Harry Potter. My name is Ron Weasley, and I've been looking forward to meeting you, Ronald said excitedly, ignoring the fact that there were others inside the compartment besides the Potter heir. Ronald went for what he deemed a handshake, but was interrupted when a long, wooden and metal object met his hand. My name is Harry Potter. But I'm nothing like what you've heard about me. Now, I believe you should be finding yourself a different compartment. Before I blow your hand off with my shotgun, Harry said darkly, as he aimed the sawed off at the redhead's right hand. The young Weasley didn't understand or know what a shotgun was, so he just didn't listen. Well, it doesn't matter if you're a bit different. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. Weasley, get the fuck out of here, or I will stuff my foot up your ass, Neville threatened, as he stood up to the boy. Ronald just looked at him like he couldn't believe him, and just narrowed his eyes. And who are you? Neville Joel Longbottom, Lord of House Longbottom, and a person that can make your life hell, Neville said, grinning a bit, as he knew Ronald's afterlife was actually hell. So what? You're a lord, who cares? Ronald asked with a sneer, as he got closer to the taller boy's face. They didn't answer, but Harry did take a quick shot at one of Ronald's trainers, blasting off the plastic and letting blood flow. The red-headed weasel fell to the floor, and clutched his foot, all the while screaming his lungs out. Eventually, the prefects came over, but when none of their wands reported using a concentrated, blasting hex, it was determined that Ronald had somehow been the victim of a random, stray spell. Thank Lucifer that the prefects were pureblood, didn't recognize guns, and were idiots. After an hour into the trip, they wondered why they hadn't been visited by the Granger daughter, until the answer came back to Harry. When she came in the first time, she was helping Neville find Trevor. Harry muttered, as he looked at said, toadless boy. They thought of this as good luck, and were thankful they didn't have to encounter the bookish girl. Harry was regretting being violent outright, but he figured that important figures wouldn't believe the redhead's claims without reason or proof beyond a hole in his foot. He also just wanted to shoot Ronald's face off. He had quickly put away his guns after the quick scuffle, and was unprepared when the next scheduled enemy engaged their door. You're Harry Potter, aren't you? I'm impressed. Not even at Hogwarts and you attacked the ginger filth. You were full of surprises. I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. The exact blonde Ponce said, as he introduced himself. He reached out for a handshake. But Harry waited on it, and watched his past enemy. To Harry's surprise, the ever-present walls of lard that Draco used to use as bodyguards in the old timeline were nowhere to be seen. Which made the boy approachable. Harry's first natural instinct was to bite out some nasty response to his old rival, but figured that he could be useful this time, as Why didn't plan on being friends with the people the blonde had problems with before. I am Harry Potter, as you know already. These are my friends, Harry said, as he gestured to the brunette and blonde that were with him. This is Neville Longbottom, and this is Luna Lovegood. You seem all right, Draco, but if you mess with my friends, what Weasley was given will be nothing compared to what you get. With that simple threat, Harry waited for the youngest Malfoy's reply. All right, message received. Draco said with a small gulp. He hadn't expected Potter to be so aggressive, but he found it slightly refreshing. And he could respect the boy's aggression. It is good to meet you all. Quote, likewise amazing bouncing ferret, Luna said absently, ignoring the annoyed look on Draco's face. Though they knew Draco would have to been downright retarded to try anything after Harry's earlier demonstration. What? She wished she had asked Crouch how to cast the curse back then, but knew she didn't have the time. All right then, Draco muttered, as he walked from the compartment, leaving the trio laughing at the turn of events. Lucifer. The doomed future. It was a dark, deathly silent night, when Lucifer once more stepped into the future that would soon cease to exist. He could already see changes occurring around London, either new buildings, or a change in the looks in the city. A few days before, he walked back through the Marais door, and found that London was once more Gothic and Victorian, while it now was once more modern. He now stood outside a small home, had looked as if nothing had happened to it in years. The grass had grown long and unruly, there was mold and rot on the walls, and the stone roof looked ready to collapse. Normally, a person would be terrified by the sight of the house, and be ready to run. But he was the devil. Lucifer walked to the house, and politely rung the doorbell, and waited. After a few moments, a thin woman with visible bones answered the door. Her once bushy brown hair now looked like dull dirty straw. He could see from her eyes, this woman was insane. She seemed to be obvious to the fact she was in a creepy house, and just had a pleasant look on her face. She wore what looked like an old, moth-bitten denim jacket, and a bloody violet hoodie underneath it. She looked happy at the sight of him, and even smiled at him. Why hello there, sir. I was just settling in with my friends for some tea. Won't you join us? Hermione Granger, the peaceful slayer, London's latest serial killer said, as she welcomed him in her house, with a friendly tone. How could I refuse? Lucifer said, a twisted smile growing on his face. Yes, this would be an easy acceptance. She then turned behind her, and called out, Harry, Ron, Mr. Lucifer has come to visit. These are your friends? Lucifer asked as he looked at the gruesome sight that awaited him in the living room of the old house. Inside the room was a low-ing table that sat in the middle of the room. Upon the table were various tea sets all spread out on the table. Lucifer looked over the table, and got a very Carol feel from the place. Then he saw her friends. At the end of the table sat the corpses of Harry Potter and Ronald Weasley, all arranged like they were enjoying some tea. Lucifer found the sight disturbing, and slightly delightful, despite the madness. Yes, this is Harry and Ron. We're best friends, you know, Hermione asked, as she hugged the bodies. At the added pressure, a gout of blood shot from Ronald's neck, staining the table. His delight slowly started to drain. Oh Ron, I guess I'll clean up again. She then walked out of the room, and returned with a bloody rag, which she sopped up the black blood with. Hermione, when was the last time your friends talked to you? Lucifer asked, as he was slightly unsure of how to approach her, as he didn't often work with insane people. Well, besides himself. Oh, just a little bit ago. Harry wanted Hedwig back, so I went and got her. Hermione muttered, as Lucifer's fear grew slightly. She creeped him out. A lot. Those voices you hear are inside your mind. I can give you another chance, you and your friends, together once more. Reliving your golden years. What do you say, Ms. Granger? Care to make a deal with the devil? Lucifer offered, a large toothy smile growing on his face, and his shadow shifted into a monstrous form, while his body remained the same. But I can't leave them here, they need me. Hermione muttered, as she looked once more at her deceased friends. Lucifer just grabbed her face, and turned it towards to him once more. Your friends are dead, Lucifer said, as a matter of fact, only to get a kitchen knife shoved into his ribs a second later. Oh, Ms. Granger, it seems you've forgotten. I cannot die. He was not angry, he was more amused. He then pulled out the knife, and melted it in his palm. After the knife was taken out of his gut, he took a few sips out of a teacup. Black tea and blood poured from the stab wound. They aren't dead. Hermione muttered, looking again at her friends, only to notice something to her horror. The veil that had covered her eyes, and hid the truth from her, was lifted. While her friends had been seemingly drinking tea before, she now saw the rotting corpses, which had flies eating away at them. The familiar owl, Hedwig, was mere bones in her bent cage now. Come along, Hermione. There's nothing left for you here. You know I'm right, Lucifer said softly, offering his hand to the girl. The Mirai door appearing behind him. She slowly walked towards him, before taking his hand. All right, Hellsetters. The trio were sitting in their compartment when the express pulled into the station. As they started to get their things, they noticed that all of the sounds around them stopped, as if the world was frozen. Hello, Harry, Mr. Longbottom, Luna, how are you all? Lucifer asked from his seat, as he suddenly appeared. Lucifer, why'd you freeze time? Neville asked the entity, as he crossed his arms. The others shared his concern. What? I can't just drop in to say hello. No, Luna said, cutting him off in his sentence. Well, you're right, I'm here to tell you what to do. Get sorted into Gryffindor, you three, you'll be less conspicuous there. Also, I've got gifts, Lucifer yelled, as he pulled out 3 different boxes, before passing them to the 3. Harry took the one that was offered to him, and found the wand Lucifer had loaned him years ago. And felt the same power rush through him, and a sense of bloodlust return. Neville's box contained what seemed at first to be a black cloak, but upon putting it on, he found that it was Harry's old invisibility cloak. Luna's box contained a small golden ring, with a triangular black stone in the center. She had no idea what it did, and just slipped it onto her finger, and did. NT mentioned the fact that several random ghosts appeared to her. So, goodbye for now, Lucifer said cheerfully, before disappearing, causing time to resume. Harry knew what their gifts were, as he technically had owned all 3 of them at one time. He hadn't recognized the wand at first, but he knew it now. He now held the Elder Wand in his hand, the oldest wand in existence, forged from one of Death's bones. Neville had the cloak of invisibility wrapped around his shoulders, torn from Death's cloak of true darkness. Luna wore the Resurrection Stone, the stone that allowed you to talk to the dead, that was once a mere rock. Lucifer had given them the Deathly Hallows. Lucifer hell. It was a hard job he was to do. Lucifer knew young Hermione Granger would be useful to his children, but his problem lied with her. He had observed the full effect of her insanity, and truly got a grip on how far she had fallen. She was far disconnected from reality, as she seemed to still be living in her Hogwarts years. Or she thought so. Apparently, she had no knowledge of Voldemort, or any negative aspects of her life. Malfoy, forgotten. Dumbledore, forgotten. Snape, forgotten. Surprisingly, most of the Weasleys were forgotten as well. Lucifer wondered about it, but decided to think it over later. Lucifer could easily put a straight frame on her mind, and send her back, but there was a small problem there. She'd want to become Harry's friend once more, but she would want to befriend Ronald Weasley as well. And he knew Harry would rather take a dip in the Styx rather than spend time with the greedy redhead. Lucifer now sat inside his palace, shifting through the mind of the young brunette, and was changing her memories slowly. He took her memories of any good thing Ronald had done for her, which unsurprisingly wasn't much, removed it, and gave her just good memories of Harry, Luna, and Neville. He was having difficulties though, as some memories of Weasley stuck to her mind. So much so that he couldn't remove every part of him, so he removed the best of him. He also kicked up the rebellious urges inside her, so she wouldn't flock so quickly to Dumbledore and his wicked sheep. Seeing that her mind was in a suitable enough state, Lucifer retreated and let the brunette awaken. What happened? Hermione asked in a childish voice, as she lifted herself from the marble floor, and looked to him in confusion. You're ready now, come on, we've got to go, Lucifer said, as he lifted her to her feet, and led her out of the palace. Where are we going? Hermione asked him, as they passed through the dark streets. Her main attention was on the sky, as a part of her said the sky wasn't that color. She shook it off, and looked towards the large building that Lucifer was leading her to. To the time stand, he'll send you back. Why do I get the feeling I'm going to hate you? Hellsettlers. Hogwarts grounds. It was with a loud screech that the Hogwarts Express stopped at Hogsmeade Station, or what they called a station. One by one, the student piled out of the train, and onto the aged wooden platform. At the rear of the wave of black, the trio stepped into the moonlight, and walked with the crowd. Harry Potter looked over the mass of cloaked students, and caught sight of the half-giant and the boats near the Black Lake. Harry, Neville, and Luna walked over when Rubeus Hagrid called the students, and walked to the farthest boat. Luckily, Ronald and Draco both climbed into different boats, far from their own. They knew that the boats fitted four, so once they climbed aboard their boat, they waited for who would join them. When the bushy-haired girl they had tried to avoid climbed into the boat, the four merely engaged in a staring contest, before Luna spoke up. She isn't the normal Hermione. She's the one we knew, she said, her tone bitter towards the other girl. Harry and Neville grimaced at this, as they really didn't want another reminder of their original timeline. Why are you here? Harry asked the girl who had followed them into the past, who just looked at him in amazement. Lucifer said that I could see you and Ron again, Harry. But he won't talk to me, Hermione muttered as she shot a look at the redhead across the lake, who just ignored her glance. That isn't the old Ron, that one is rotting underneath an icy lake in hell, Neville said harshly, as he thought once more about the red-headed skeleton. Why, he was a greedy, treacherous git. He got what he deserved. Harry growled, his words surprising the girl, who was shocked how Harry talked about his best friend. Harry, he is our friend, Hermione mumbled, looking down at her lap at this. She seemed sort of lost for a moment, before looking back at them. He stopped being my friend in 81, when he joined on with that bearded bastard. Just like you, Harry yelled back, his rare anger coming out to play. He had never had someone to let his anger out on, so his bottled-up vengeance was leaking to the surface. The force of his raw magic was heating up the lake around them, causing dead fish to rise to the surface, and the edges of their boat began to break apart. The entire thing shaking at the rhythm of his deep breathing. Before their boat could break from underneath them, Neville jumped forward and wrestled Harry back down to their seat. Hermione had no idea how much he had helped her. Hermione Granger, if I must, I recommend that you leave us alone as soon as we touch land, Luna told her, cold fire in her eyes. The brunette simply nodded at this, and sat back in silence. Her mood improved slightly though, as Harry and Ron encouraged her inside her mind. She wouldn't give up yet. Elohim. The Hall of Cronus. Elohim, the entity most commonly referred to as God, was facing a problem. He had felt and noticed strange effects when he would travel to Earth, and began to think. It took him a long time to think over the possible cause of these changes. When he decided to visit Cronus' realm, he had traveled into the Greek afterlife once more, a dimension he hadn't visited since his days as Zeus, and entered the place that Cronus had once called his own. The Hall of Cronus was a tall gray palace, which looked much like how the Pantheon had looked back during the days of the Greek, but much more sinister. He had never visited the former house of his father during his time as an Olympian, as his father hadn't been there during the Greek period. It had only been during the Roman period, when he had been released from hell as Saturn, when he had returned. After a long time in the honor of Rome, his father had retreated back to the Greek afterlife, where he resided to the current day. As Elohim walked closer to the dark building, he felt his beard regrow once more, and a regal toga began to form over him, as he once more took on the form of the thunder god. Once he reached the large entrance doors of the hall, he knocked his thick knuckles against the stone doors, creating a large echoing noise throughout the structure. At the sound, the doors creaked open slowly, allowing him entrance. He put himself together, and walked through the doors, into the fortress of time. He began to walk for what seemed to be an endless entirety, but eventually he reached what he guessed to be the throne room, as there sat a giant silver throne, where a thin elderly man sat calmly. Zeus stepped to the front of the throne, and placed himself before his father, who seemed to have not noticed him. Before Zeus could speak, the olden entity spoke to him. Zeus, or is it Elohim now? I know why you have come, as I see your brother Hades had been busy. I do not like his actions, since he is using the help of my counterpart to manipulate time to his whim. As I was sentenced to parole in the afterlife, I haven't been able to stop him, and neither can you. Cronus, Saturn, Kronos, Father Time, said to his son, the one he hated the most. He would not give his son guidance or assistance in his time of need. Father, I must stop him. Zeus pleaded to his father, a part of him knowing he wouldn't be very helpful after the whole castration thing. Your brother is working on his own accord, and within his own rules. While I do not like that he is imposing on my domain, I cannot stop him. If I, Cronus, one of the last remaining titans, cannot stop him, what makes you think you can? I have faith that I can. Faith is for the foolish. Cronus muttered, disliking how his son had placed so much emphasis on the belief in his later incarnation. Faith is all that some have, even those that may be foolish, it is all they can do. Believing is sometimes enough for them. What do they have faith in? You who sits up in your pearly white clouds, and watches as your world burns. What happened to the Greek and Roman honor in you? I've not been Zeus in a long time, old man. Zeus, Elohim once more, screamed at the man. Elohim quickly scratched his nails along the marble floor, causing gigantic cracks through the entire room, and holes to form. One such hole swallowed up Cronus' throne, dumping the man onto the floor. You will regret that, boy. There is no scythe this time, Cronus exclaimed, getting to his feet, as his body grew from the pasty thin it used to be, into a brawny and hard frame. Reaching his hand forward, he froze Elohim in time temporarily. Elohim was shocked, as he had never before felt the effect of time itself, and was left struggling to escape. Fine by me. Quote, hell any old time. That was the nightmare before Christmas, and all throughout hell, not a creature was dreaming, as all were screaming. In the great big palace, atop of the underworld, sat a sully man, named Lucy, who tonight looked strangely like Gary Busey. His mood was sour, as he was all alone, and truly dour on this night. The ones that he loved, his sweet little children, were away, leaving him waiting for the new day. He wondered for their sakes, and those of others, as he stayed so bothered. He had done enough on this night, sent his children their gifts, and gave bad people shit. A lusty pineapple for Adolf. A new David star to dear Joseph, and an itchy bathrobe for Osama. He hoped they'd be happy, as otherwise their morning would be crappy. His children had yet to use their gifts, a black cloak, a stick, and a stone. He was truly the greatest fake father Athrone. Now, he watched those little three sail the dark lake, and brush away their oldest keepsake. The saddened brunette, their once threat brooded oh so quiet, avoiding the blonde, oh so violent. In fact, he looked at his little bleak blonde, whose anger dawned at that high peak. The entire quartet remained that way, their path so gray. The perceived threat floated along with them, the tension so very bloated. Lucifer so hoped his children would get along, with the girl who had done so wrong. He knew it would take time. But he knew the grime would disappear, just like the anger of the seer. Lucifer watched his children in peace, and quietly began to smooth the creases within the group. He knew they would be fine, and turned his attention to the issues of divine. He left them on their own, and assumed they would continue with what they've known. He wished them silent luck, and hoped they wouldn't suck. They wouldn't, as they couldn't. Hellsetters. Night of September 1st, 1991. Harry was actually frozen for several moments when the trio stepped into Hogwarts' main hall, the nostalgia taking him for a rough ride. The last time he had seen the hallowed hall, he had been embarking on his last adventure, traveling out into the Forbidden Forest, his bravery carrying him to his death. Now, he stepped once more into the prestigious hall that housed the true beauty of Hogwarts had to offer, the welcoming pull it offered to each and every one that stepped inside. Now, he was back where his grand and dangerous journeys had all began, his true home. He was once more taking the first step that started him on the defined path that eventually led to his demise, and the profit of those that had only followed him for his sacrifice. He was stepping into that vicious circle once more, the circle that would repeat his destined downfall, and destroy everything he had ever dreamed of. He would not play their game. And neither would his friends. Now, the vengeful Harry Potter, the sadistic Luna Lovegood, the stoic Neville Longbottom, and the demented Hermione Granger stepped forward to face the judgment of the sacred artifact that decided the fate of innocent children for millennia. Their plan had been outlined and clearly stated to them. Their mission was to try and closely repeat the events of the previous timeline, but bend the timeline in their favor, while avoiding detection by a certain old man. A hidden part of their objective, only revealed to the leader of their small group, was the most important part of the operation. Avoid massive changes, as a certain meddling deity would be watching for anything major that could disrupt the timeline. Elohim, or God, was not to notice them. No chance could be taken. Neville Longbottom. So, Mr. Longbottom, what are you doing back here? Come back to kill someone perhaps? Prevent some great tragedy? It isn't often I encounter time travelers. The Sorting Hat chuckled, as the memories of the boy flowed through him. Time travel, how novel. You could say that, Neville Joel Longbottom said cryptically, though a GHT undertone was present behind his voice, a small grin hiding on his face. The Sorting Hat noticed, and laughed once more, confusing everyone in the great hall besides a raven-haired boy, a feisty blonde, and a mentally confused brunette. I would assume Mr. Potter will be joining you. I'm sure of that at least, seeing as you both have that old look in your eyes. Yep. No matter how much I hate this, Gryffindor. Also, could you stick Weasley in Hufflepuff? I might just visit you with a sewing kit. Lunar Lovegood. Phoenix. Luna. Jacqueline Lovegood demanded as soon as the Sorting Hat touched her head, a strict but light tone to her voice. The Sorting Hat just lifted a clothed eyebrow upwards, and shook slightly. That isn't a house, but I would assume you'll be joining your friends. The Sorting Hat said wearily, though his statement ended as an assumption. Luna just frowned, and was seemingly lost in thought. Ah, so many of the fanfictions I read have Phoenix as a house. Though normally Harry makes it. Oh well, just stick me with the stupid kittens. Luna muttered, her voice now low and upset, much like a child told no. Gryffindor. Both Longbottom and Lovegood watched their fellow first years from the table of theirs, gold and red lining their robes. Harry still stood with the short Forstickens, looking bored out of his mind. The closest thing interest they could look forward to was Malfoy's sorting, but they knew the outcome already. Slytherin. Some things never change, though one thing did. But no one truly noticed this change, and wouldn't notice quite yet. Draconis Lucius Malfoy's eyes glowed a shining blue for a split second. The White Knight was moved forward, stepping past the Black Bishop. Harry Potter. Harry, the woman that had once been the head over Harry, and would again, called out for him to step to the sentient hat that would decide his fate within this timeline. Though it would obey him, or it would be getting a visit from a pair of scissors and a Zippo lighter that night. Harry marched forward to the small stage that lay at the forefront of the hall. A wizarding hat sat on the short stool before him. Harry picked the hat up from the stool and in no time at all, placed it upon his head. Harry opened his mind, and allowed the eons-old living artifact to read him. What in hell are you doing here? A sarcastic and scratchy voice muttered as Harry placed the moth-bitten pointed hat over his head. Harry just rolled his eyes as the Sorting Hat laughed at its own joke. I'm on a cret mission to change the future and kill anyone that gets in my way, all while maintaining a cover of the Wizarding World's Golden Boy. What? Hasn't anyone else done this before? Harry whispered to the sentient hat, who just broke out laughing at how sincere Harry sounded. Unknown to him, the entire Great Hall looked around in confusion as the Sorting Hat broke into loud, guffawing laughter. An old senile man paid great attention. Though fortunately for the Hellsetters, the man was benevolent in this universe. My boy, I haven't laughed in a millennia. Where do you want to be sorted? The Sorting Hat asked, just deciding to forget its duty for once, and let the child who brought laughter back to it decide for himself. Harry looked up at the top of the hat, and just smiled a twisted grin. Well, since I need to be golden. How about Gryffindor? The three time travelers were marched through Hogwarts towards the tower Harry and Neville had once called their home, all the while indulging themselves in their memories. Harry mainly ignored the overplayed attention the normal students paid him, though he did feel two sets of eyes on him. He turned behind him, and caught sight of two identical redheads standing in a small alcove of the hall. His observers were George and Fred Weasley, though he could tell something was off about the twins. His confusion was quickly answered, as both twins' eyes glowed bright into the light darkness. Harry decided he would open that can of worms once the Gryffindors settled into bed. As he looked at the two, they began flickering strangely, as the two lost their appearance briefly, becoming replaced by two familiar-looking figures. The person that normally went by Fred or Forge, was now a muscular, horned figure dressed in a militant uniform. In contrast, the person known mostly as George or Gred, was now replaced by a lithe, beautiful man. From memory, Harry identified the man as an incubus, though the man seemed to be strong in aura than the ones Harry had met on Hell's streets. Just as soon as these mysterious figures appeared, the two turned back into the normally mischievous Weasley twins. The two flashed Harry a toothy grin then, and seemed to disappear into thin air. Harry, are you all right? Was it Lucy? Luna asked him, breaking him out of his confusion about the entities impersonating two people he had once thought of as brothers. No, I'm fine, and it wasn't him. I just saw something, Harry muttered, as he began to catch up with the group of innocent first years, Luna following his pace. Before the ignorant prefects could notice, the two stepped up to Neville, and blended into the small group of crimson and gold first years. He had another little mystery to solve. Another one was whether or not there were other surprises waiting for them, and where the hell was Al? Fourth Chaos Pub. Hell. Hey Al, aren't you supposed to be on Earth? The barman asked Alphonse Capone as the named ghost lingered at the barside. Al just rolled his eyes at the hairy demon that ran the bar, and took another shot of liquor, which just flew through what acted as his throat. Being a ghost had drawbacks. He sometimes regretted now passing on. Hey, I taught the kid to shoot, gave him my gun, and Lucy gave him the wand. The kid'll be fine, Al said dismissively, as he spent enough time with the boy to be sure of his skills. His hope wasn't unfounded though, as Harry was far from defenseless. All of the guidance ghosts weren't overly required anyway, he'd be back by morning. That was the plan at least. For your sake, bub, I hope you're right. The edge of reality. In a dark corner of existence itself, a wall of pure darkness stretched outward throughout space, a large crack forming throughout it. Within seconds, the crack began to grow, and the wall around it began to shake and tremble. Near it, two figures stood silent facing its massiveness, the only living beings in over several billion parsecs. One of the two stood solemnly still, while the other was tenderly rubbing the crack, feeling dark energy growing beneath his fingers. My lord, do you know what is causing this? Is it Lucifer? Tothiel, the Archangel of Light asked, shaking slightly from being in the farthest place from his element. The edge of reality had never known light, and would never feel it. The figure with him was of a tall, bearded man that looked like age itself. The man seemed conflicted about everything, even himself, as he slowly began to flicker from this and another form. At random, he wizened man would be replaced with a massive skull, the entirety of its body being the skull and two gigantic bony hands. Tothiel ignored this, as he knew his lord could change depending on where he was residing. No, this isn't his work, Ica. Lucifer helped imprison them. He may love chaos, but he wouldn't release them. It would mean his demise. Elohim, once known as Nuthel, spoke. Out in the near-endless reaches of the end of reality. He twitched slightly, as he heard the millions of screams coming from the entrapped gods he had sealed away for their madness. Whenever he visited the margin, he always felt their hatred, and felt a measure of sorrow and guilt at his actions. Now, it seemed his judgment would come, as the boundary was breaking. Time and space would be ripped apart, and heaven and hell wouldn't matter. The elder gods would ring out the end of everything. Knights of Hell, The Night of Deception. Harry Potter, September, 1991. Despite what he planned, Harry found himself lost in a world that had once been his own, and never truly would be. As days passed, he watched as living ghosts of those he had lost over the years, either in school or in war, and felt slight grief himself. Even worse, he found himself getting over all of the deaths quicker than he should have. The impact was lessening. Harry wasn't blind to what he was becoming. It began with the betrayal and plans. His desire to enact vengeance on those that tried to take everything from him. He was becoming cold, unfeeling, insensitive to the lives of those around him. It wasn't a quick progress either. This icy transformation had been coming along for a long while now, but only now did he notice. Harry thought he was alone in his turmoil, as his friends didn't seem that much affected either. But then he locked eyes with Neville one early morning. Harry knew, while the hero he had once been began to die, he wasn't the only one. They all had scars to bear, constant reminders of their mistakes. Harry began to learn then. Lucifer's ultimate lesson. With rebirth, comes death of the self. Neville Longbottom. Neville focused on his constant task, one he wasn't given, but he had undertaken on his own. The war had made him paranoid, and his years of study and improvement had honed his senses to warrant the state he found himself in. What had him on edge was how things were changing without them even trying. Though some of them made sense. On the day of their flying lesson, as he didn't have a remembrall, Malfoy couldn't take it and cause the hysterics from the last timeline to repeat. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, however. Once again one of the brooms were jinxed, but this time Seamus Finnegan was the unfortunate one who found himself with a broken arm. Oddly, besides Finnegan's injury, nothing from that day was the same. Malfoy or a Slytherin didn't steal anything, no one got angry and decided to chase them, and nothing noteworthy happened afterwards. The day was completely uneventful, and that really set him off. Something was wrong, and Neville knew it. As the days went by, things were boring really, as they were forced into the routine from so long ago. He noticed how terrible their classes were, as they had been so distracted back then, either by excitement or in his case, fear of the grease ball that taught potions. Harry was distracted most of the time, and Neville could tell his friend wasn't over the past, no matter how much he said he was. Luna seemed fine, he guessed, but she never really portrayed her true feelings unless Hermione was around. That girl still messed with him, as she seemed broken and only followed Harry around like a lost dog, though somehow she kept up with her work. He was still surprised by that. There was one item of interest, however. Malfoy still challenged Harry to a duel, but instead over grades. Neville just decided that this timeline was weird, and was slightly hurt that Harry didn't choose him as his second. Oh well, maybe next time. Luna Lovegood. September 17, 1991, midnight, the Hogwarts Trophy Room. Why did Harry choose me again? Luna thought as she followed the boy to the near spotless room C. Ontaining Hogwarts. Cried over the years. Oh yeah, the ferret challenged him, and Harry was curious. Weird. She skipped along merrily after the raven-haired boy, as they entered together into the dimly lit display room. And looked forward at their adversaries. Across from them, Draco Malfoy stood next to a crystal display case, one of the two living lumps of lard next to him. Instead of a sneer, a strange grin sat upon Malfoy's face. His pristine teeth sparkling in the moonlight. Luna looked at him, and tried to see through him, but only found a solid wall separating her from his mind. After that, she tried the future, but oddly found that from this one point in time, the future was absolutely uncertain. That scared him greatly, and actually made her question their actions. Turning to her friend without haste, Luna saw Harry roll his eyes steadily and step forward towards the opposing blonde, a challenge in his tone. Well, Malfoy, I'm here, what's so important? because you and I both know we're not here to fight," Harry stated in a matter-of-fact manner, as they all knew the dual excuse, simply that. To their shared surprise, instead of blowing up or sneering, Malfoy simply chuckled. "You're so very smart, Mr. Potter. It's truly a shame you've chosen your colors. Your talents could have been so useful to our side, though I will admit, we wasted you for nothing," Malfoy said coyly, as he stepped towards them, the large boy known as Crabbe staying by the far edge of the room, immobile. As Luna looked closer at the strange wall surrounding the other blonde, she felt something unnatural coming from him. She shivered slightly, before reaching for Harry, only to have him collapse against her. His body dead weight, they fell backwards, the world going dark around them. "But, let's see if I can't convince you, Harry Potter." It hurt badly. Harry didn't know where he was, when he was, or even what was happening around him. One second he had been in the trophy room with Luna, confronting Malfoy. And now he was someplace. The place he found himself in looked like Hogwarts Castle, but if the entire castle was on drugs. Portions of the castle were crushed and destroyed, debris and detached towers floating in the strange white space that surrounded everything. Harry found himself on a cracked stone pathway that curved through the air, created a tunnel of sorts that spun around, leading towards the corrupted castle. While he was hesitant to try, Harry began to walk on the path, and found that he stayed planted on the path even when gravity would say otherwise. He was utterly confused, not even counting the fact that he felt like his skin was being ripped off and his flesh fried. Harry struggled onward, his shadow trailing behind him as he walked the path to the false Hogwarts castle, utter silence filling the voice he traveled through. His own footsteps didn't even make a single sound, leading him to believe that he had gone deaf. He was wrong, of course, but he had absolutely no way of knowing. Upon reaching the castle, he quickly pulled the door open with all his strength, and trudged into the entrance of the castle. His eyes ached from the sudden brightness of the aged torches adorning the stone walls, and moved forward as if his body knew where to go. Upon reaching yet another giant set of doors, he pushed again, his entire body struggling to find the strength to continue on. It was only when he thought he was truly on death's door, did the actual ones open. Before he noticed it, he went flying forwards through the doors, and found himself sprawled inside the great hall of Hogwarts. Not a soul occupied the room besides himself, which was odd, as he had never seen the hall empty in either life. After attempting to climb to his feet, and falling once more, did Harry notice something. The pain was gone. Harry James Potter, born on July 31, 1980, in St. Mungo's Hospital. Immediately afterwards, you were retransported to your parents' cottage in the village of Godric's Hollow, West Country, England. At a year old, your parents were both murdered by the man known as Tom Riddle, or Voldemort. You were sent to live with your relatives, and starved and abused commonly. Need I say more? A clear, humble voice spoke out in the silence, coming from nowhere and everywhere. At the disturbance, Harry found himself able to speak once more, and shifted himself into a sitting position. He shifted his aching eyes around the room, looking for the source of the odd voice, but found nothing. Only after he gave up and lowered his eyes, did he feel something, a presence in front of him. When he opened his eyes once more, Draco Malfoy stood before him, but an odd shimmering effect surrounded him. Before Harry could say a single thing, Malfoy spoke once more. Before you mistake me, I am not Draco Malfoy, I'm merely using his form for my purpose. I'm here to give you a chance, Mr. Potter, the only one you'll get. The imposter spoke, his gaze shifting over Harry's form, before smiling gently. Harry took notice that the man's smile didn't match the hard look in his eyes. Why would I even take whatever offer you'll give me? The one I've got is pretty nice, Harry muttered, his eyes scrutinizing the imposter, before a question came to mind. Who are you? You may call me Michael, and I'm here to give you the only chance you will get at redemption. If you continue on the path you're walking, you, your friends, and everyone you care for will suffer for it. The man spoke. The fact that his words were so sharp didn't fall unnoticed. You're an angel, aren't you? Aren't you guys supposed to be nice, and give out flowers and stuff? Harry asked, recollection coming to him of a time when Lucifer had explained Elohim's men. And who to avoid. Michael just smirked righteously, and lowered himself to Harry's eye level. Most of us are like that, but I'm an archangel, and I don't have any more patience for people like you. Michael said, scorn and anger pooling into his voice as his grin fell, replaced by a heavy frown. What will it be, Potter? Eternal damnation, or redemption? Well, there's only one choice. Now isn't there? Lucifer. He was mad. No, that was an understatement. He was furious. No, he was livid. After all that pearly bastard had done, he goes one step further, and tries to interfere in his game. Lucifer expected this, of course, but not as early on as they were. No, Elohim was cheating. This wouldn't be allowed, not if he had anything to say about it. He knew he couldn't save Harry now, but he had faith. No, he had something else to do. At that, Lucifer began to walk from his throne room, and headed towards the highest point of his palace. An old tower that was completely invisible to anyone besides himself and one other. The tower was special, as it was only one of the 3 ways out of hell, but was only a one-way trip. The return trip would be much harder to achieve, but it was necessary. Walking up the extremely long spiral staircase, Lucifer let his anger stew up within him. By the time he reached the top of the elongated tower, he laid eyes on a pure white, wooden door. No markings or designs adorned this door, it was simply a plain white door. Lucifer sighed deeply, stepped forward, and placed his palm around silver knob of the perfect, flawless door. Closing his eyes firmly, he pulled the door open, harsh light pouring into the tower. Unnaturally, the light shifted around him, the room being consumed while he stood as a single dark figure in the white visage of the room. Better get ready, brother, because I'm coming to visit. Knights of Hell, the night of Chronicle. It had been said that it would truly be a dark day. We and the fallen returned to the realm he once resided in. None of Elohim's citizens had any idea what would have happened that day, or even had a warning. It began ominously, as per usual when the Lord of Darkness was involved with their dealings. That those so blessed would be gifted the brazen truth, which would shake their beliefs deep within. For with this tide of circumstance, something that wasn't meant to ever occur, so did again. For the first time in several millennia, there was a thunderstorm in heaven. James Charles Potter heaven. Prior to his demise, James Potter had always heard tales of how pleasant and worthwhile the afterlife would be. The next great adventure. The chance to live once more, and reunite with those he'd lost. Those were lies, and he had listened and loved them. He walked calmly to his death with those soft falsities rumbling in his mind. He had thought their sacrifice would be worth it, the world would be saved, their son would live old, and the Potters would live on. The Potter family was dead, and everything they had known and worked for was gone forevermore. James Potter was a bitter man. Now, James and his dear wife were trapped in the domain of an eternal man that neither of them worshipped. They never praised the man or his work, which many knew would have damned whoever didn't. However, they weren't. James and Lily both wondered separately why the being known primarily as God would take them into his realm when they had shown him no respect, and wouldn't allow them to leave either. They had both tried, of course, when news of their son had finally surfaced. His young and innocent soul traded for that of a wicked old man who didn't deserve retribution, so Harry Potter was left to fend for himself in a realm of flame and death. The Potters weren't pleased in the slightest, and within days they had tried everything to leave. They applied for reincarnation, tried to enter the Wayward Spirit program, tried to find employ in the guidance agenda, and finally began to think of simply escaping. None of them worked, much to their joined sadness, but they knew now that without the utmost decision, there was no escape from the clouds. It had just been another day of unhappiness for the two, when James had decided to head to the Pale Senate to plead their case once again, that he froze in his tracks. James now stood in the center of his city, the main capital of their new home, in a near-famous park that sat on the city's center. A strong wind blew by him, rustling the trees and plants around him, an eerie howl calling out on the breeze, as if nature herself were afraid. What was happening was both extremely confusing and horrifying to James, as the worst possibility had come to. Though the two Potters had not been dead for too long, They had learned the basics of heaven easily, and learned what it was like. They were told that heaven was a constant state of bliss, warm sunshine, cool winds, light rain. Every day was a blessing. They were told that each and every day would be the best, and everything would turn out in the best way every time. It was supposed to be a literal paradise, the works. When James heard the crackle of thunder, he knew something was deadly wrong, and it made this paradise feel like hell for those few moments. Fear became feeling. On instinct, James looked up towards the previously beautiful sky, and noticed a coming darkness that rushed forward, devouring the sky in an ink-like fog. The clouds began to blacken, heavy rain began to descend, and heaven's archetype started to twist and warp. The world morphed around James, turning heaven itself into a living, breathing creature. Trees burned and blackened, the harsh dirt beneath his feet turned to brutal mud, buildings melted. And the holy statues surrounding the park turned to demonic beasts, marching around as stone sentiments to reality's monsters. Then, the music began. Rough, loud music screaming. Words in such a volume that none of heaven's citizens could make out what was being sung exactly. The sound have risen in a quick time, to a level so high, that each resident of the pearly clouds found themselves with bloodied ears and loss of hearing. They were quite literally left deaf to their objections. The song didn't hold James's attention for too long, however, as a loud bang echoed out through the realm. An emerald explosion rocketing in the distance. Though James had only traveled through it once, he had looked through many times, so he knew what had been blown up. The gate to heaven had been destroyed. NPOV. Those unfortunate angels who had employment guarding the pearly gates, were now regretting ever signing up. In the midst of what had seemed to be an average, perfect day, everything literally went to hell. Twin angels, Abaziah and Corbin, now found themselves planted firmly against the hard ground, unable to move from their pain. The two had just been discussing plans for the day and week, when the tactical outpost that comprised the front gates exploded outwards. With the destruction, they flew back from their watchtower, their bodies flying dead through the shrill air. There was a solid thunk. That the porcelain bodies slammed hard against the cobblestone walls that surrounded the angelic outpost, burning pain coursing through their veins. If they had any. The elder of the two, Abaziah, now found himself pinned beneath a moving hunk of stone, which rose upwards to encase him in a rocky vice. Corbin, however, got to have an unwanted pleasure. He was the first to see heaven's latest visitor. Lucifer, the devil himself, the dawn of creation. Brother, do you ever wonder why it's only us? A hollow, odd, but young voice spoke out in the expansion of space. The universe stirred around them. Empty and gray, no life persisting besides themselves. In the empty void of existence, a small plane of land floated in the balance, with two small figures planted firmly on it. At the center of the floating island, a short, tan sapling stood planted, its thin branches reaching out into the abyss above. Its companion, however, rose from the dirt of the island's edge. A single black rose, with two shining, copper eyes, its thin frame straining to reach a fraction of the tree's height. Its white petals shook, as the flower leaned forward, anticipation obvious in its stance. It always looked forward to their discussions. Yes, I often do, but I feel there are more out there, or there will be. The tree rumbled, a small, wooden face speaking from its side. The tree didn't smile, or make much of an expression, but its words spoke on their own. An odd warm, but stern thoughtfulness trailed along with the sounds, as the words finished. Others, but why haven't we seen them before? The rose asked, its gleaming eyes shot open, the possibility surprising it. Perhaps, they didn't want to be seen. Quote, Lucifer, Elysium, the home of paradise, the birthplace of tranquility, the stronghold of kind and fairness, guarded by two weaklings. A deep, sharp, and crisp voice spoke in the onslaught of roaring destruction. In the dark fog that surrounded heaven's borders, a tall, rail-thin man stood in the shaded murky region beyond. The man's frame was shrouded in dark red silk clothing. The cloak along with it made the man out to be royalty, just by the look of it and the man. Not counting the noble manner and appearance of the man, there even seemed to be an air of confidence and arrogance floating among him, though one strong emotion overflooded the others. Anger. The sheltered, foolish idiots that lived in the realm swarmed around him, yelling insults and trying to fight him with any method possible. It had been not a single hour, and he had been forced to put down 7 of the powers, and had faced off against 2 of the powerful cherubim he had ever seen. Despite the might of the warriors, his opposition died down with a shuddering, striking lion's roar. Lucifer ignored the dying beast, as he looked downward at the latest slain, a bulky cherub with the body of a man, wings of vulture, and face of a lion. He ignored its mews, and simply ripped the feline-esque creature apart at the seams, sending scarlet blood and wet tendons falling to the perfected green grass. He didn't care. The rules had been broken, and he would have no mercy on those that sought to protect the old man. Heaven would drown in its mistakes, he would ensure it. Lucifer made his way through the ideal civilization, ignoring that which he passed. Not even noticing a confused and raven-haired man that looked much like the reason he came to this realm. Nevertheless, Lucifer moved forward steadily, the ground burning away to ash from whence he had stepped. He ignored the trail of ruination he left in his wake, and continued on until he reached what seemed to be a fantastical monument. A dreamful, white palace rested atop the highest hill in the realm, its tallest peak rising to the very edge of the dimension's reach. Lucifer thought it was egotistical of his former friend, but then again, Lucifer had a palace much to the same design, and he was the first hypocrite. Despite this, Lucifer walked onward until he reached the pure, wooden frame that composed the palace's front. Ignoring courtesy, Lucifer struck forward, his arm dissolving into a shadowy mass, which sank quickly through the aged oak. Within seconds, dark streaks broke out in the door, causing it to splinter and explode outwards, showering him in dust and wood chipping. With a sharp, malicious grin, Lucifer stepped into the one place he was never meant to be. The fortress of virtue was now to be ravaged in might and carnage. Reality's edge. Brother, we must seal them out. The luminous figure shouted out in the harshness of deep space, pushing his spindly form against what appeared to be a gigantic scar. In the center of what appeared to be a shadowy wall, a large jagged slice swung downward, a shimmering light fluttering through the sliver of shadowy form. Every so often, a great force would slam against the crack, forcing the man back, only for him to strike forward again against it. Why should I? They are the only ones capable of stopping either of us. Why would I let you be unstoppable? A cruel voice asked lowly, as a blackened figure respectfully watched the first from a distance. The bright man simply stared at his companion in shock, as if he hadn't expected to be rejected so strongly, or at all. He thought he had been forgiven in the centuries past. But he was corrected to his sadness. Lucifer, whatever issues we share, we may resolve them later on. Now, we must stop them. The embodiment of light, Elohim the God of creation begged, as he fought against the might of thousands of beings just as or stronger than himself. How he even withstood their rage, he didn't know, but he believed it was due to his faith. His brother would argue otherwise. Tell me, Elohim, what do you think will come of this? The imprisonment of those that tore us out of the dirt, and made us gods? Lucifer asked, his eyes piercing the others, as he stood solemn and firm before him, his face giving no hint to his full state of mind. That our endless struggles will actually end, that we could forget all that's happened, and live in peace with one another. Lucifer, I know we could move on, could work together to right our wrongs. Elohim muttered, his dream of earning his brother's forgiveness shattering by the second, along with his willpower. With a sudden impact from the crack, he knew Hastur wouldn't give up easily. He dreaded to think of what would happen if he lost, if the crack was ripped apart, and they fled back through. Eternal torture, and ever-repeating death would surely be his fate. I never took you for an idiot. Lucifer and Elohim, why did you return? A tired, shaken voice questioned what appeared to be an empty room. But Elohim knew better. He knew the moment the gates had given in, the moment his subjects lost lives, the moment when the creature of negativity stepped into his kingdom. With that, Lucifer stepped from the hidden shadows of a nearby pillar, and faced the elderly man that was seated in the room. Elohim remained in his throne-like seat, his form stock still, his features vacant and illegible. You broke the rules. Elohim's eyes widened slightly, before straightening once more. His eons-old mind whirled into motion, attempting to decipher what exactly the wax-pale man meant. He wouldn't, however, as their agreement was made long ago, and they both had faced and dealt with many issues and events over the thousands of. At the painless question, Lucifer's face twisted and narrowed, spite and rage shaking in his glance. The year 5 BC, your offspring was brought into the mortal world, and you declared him your child and proxy. We made an agreement that those we undertook would remain free from our conflicts, and our issues would stay between us. You sent that pompous, feathered prick after Harry Potter. Lucifer snarled, his form blurring forward, until his bony grasp was wrapped firmly around Elohim's thin throat. To add to the man's discomfort, Lucifer's nails sharpened to pinpoints, his thumb now slicing through Elohim's jugular, causing a thin streak of golden blood to pour out. The elder just gulped, and locked eyes with the man he once regarded and thought of as his brother. Michael didn't know of our arrangement. I sent him to observe, not intervene. His actions are his own. Elohim whimpered, his neck and face covered in the essence of immortality, as he felt the agony only a fellow eternal could inflict. Just from Lucifer's grip, he felt his entire being shake, his organs grind and contract against his immortal shell. It felt as if he had swallowed a savage, rotary blade, which had gone to mayhem with him, destroyed all that which comprised his anatomy. Oh, why, my dear brother, do I doubt that? Neville Longbottom. The Hospital Wing, Hogwarts, mid-afternoon, Saturday, September 21, 1991. They were worried, of course, after what had happened. Neville glanced over at his best friend, who seemed just as asleep as he had been for the last few days, of which Neville and a certain blonde had been visiting eagerly for. Despite the days that had passed, Harry remained within his coma, which he had been told was from magical exhaustion. Neville knew that was utter shit, as he had seen Harry at the pinnacle of magical combat, using up mountains of magical ability, and he really doubted that Harry would waste such effort on Draco Malfoy. Happened. Neville was angry, of course, and had even gone after Malfoy. But there wasn't a chance that the sniveling brat he beat to a pulp had done anything. Now, he just sat in an old, wooden chair at his friend's bedside, watching for any sign of the snarky, high-tempered friend he knew was there. He hadn't seen anything though, and that just, damn it, Crookshanks. Neville yelped, prying the rabid cat's jaws from his fingertips, unlatching the little beast's death grip. He had no clue why, but the rude kitten had taken to biting to express himself. Neville was really starting to believe the demonic cat story Harry had told him. Said cat, however, just stared up from Neville's lap, a malevolent gleam in his small, slitted, golden eyes. Neville just ignored it, and leaned back against the tan, stone walls of the clinic. Neville just figured the cat hated him for not being Granger, as he had been told of the first, third year. He didn't like the reminder, especially since, in a way, he was the cat's rebound. He was just starting to doze off. Hen he heard light footsteps at the entrance of the room, causing him to jolt awake at the slight sound. After mere seconds, a person he had never before seen stuck their head into the room, before stepping forward. You're Neville Longbottom, aren't you? Lucifer and Elohim. I know, you've no reason to trust me, the same with yourself, but I've only spoken the truth in these years. The ancient and wrinkled man muttered, his form pressed against the throne he had called his own, for so very long. The truth. Isn't that interesting? Are you still telling people that you cast me out? Or that I fell, because I became jealous of those fuckwits you made? Explain that, Mr. Lord. Lucifer growled, his tone both mocking and furious at once, giving off a dangerous and sharp aspect not many saw of the Demon King. The few who did, deserved their fates, and met them swiftly. I've told no lies. You lost your place at my side, when you turned against those you swore to protect. Quote, Elohim groaned out, his eyes facing the burning gaze of his only kin, besides the young man Elohim had created for the sole purpose of humanity's salvation. What about our days in Greece then? You sent me off, and tricked me into leading damned souls to rest. You screwed over both of us, and you saw where that led rise. You did this all. Lucifer roared, his form shifting quickly from the ghostly pale man he had been to a raging form not that far from the dragons of old, before to that of a different man. This man had long, straggling midnight hair trailing across his shoulders and skull. Along with the man's contrasts, were a set of dark, dirty green eyes that shined in the dim light of the throne room. As his anger soared, bones and decay began to rise and break through the marble flooring, surrounding the man in an aura of death and fear. Within seconds, Hades, lord of the underworld, death, and greed lived once more, but he was not alone. At the very shift Elohim followed suit, until a muscular, bearded man exploded with electricity, filling with the room with static and light. At the impact, the two gods were thrown apart, only to crash against opposing walls. As one, the two locked eyes, before flying towards one another. The sins of both, and those they had known, would face judgment and retribution. For justice would be found only in conflict, and soaked in the sacred blood of immortals. Neville Joel Longbottom, Hogwarts Hospital Wing, 1991. I'm sorry, do I know you? Neville asked in apprehension and confusion, as a girl he'd never seen strolled up to his side. The girl looked to him, then to Harry's bedside in thought, before turning back to him with a shy smile. Her dark violet hair caught his eyes briefly, before his gaze fell on the yell Owtie tied snug and nicely around her neck. Neville nodded briefly before his eyes flew to hers. They were beauty no, he had to focus, he didn't even know her damn name. Oh, I guess you were distracted by the sorting, I'm Mary. Mary Falcon, Hufflepuff, she explained, a small grin erupting on her face as she held her hand towards him. Neville shook gracefully, before racking his brain as quickly as he could. If there was one thing Robert Catesby taught him, it was occlumency. Also, to stall for time when needed. Mary, Neville asked her politely, changing the pronunciation for each. While she interested him, he had to think about this carefully. He needed to distract her, while he thought over the mystery that she was. He had never met her, but he had to make sure. Mary, it's Celtic. My family is really into the old ways. We celebrate Samhain and all the old traditions. Mary answered, almost embarrassed, as her cheeks warmed slightly, obvious by her light skin tone. Neville didn't notice this however, as he was far away from the hospital wing. Images flashed before his eyes, sound speeding forward rapidly, every single image from his Hogwarts years passing by in the duration of a few seconds. While he was shifting through his thoughts and memories, where he was oblivious to his surroundings, something else was. Crookshanks the half-Kneazle sat in rare silence and immobile, his piercing eyes forward at the visitor, his sharp judgment muted from those that would need it. Neville came to an answer in that time, and he was absolute in his investigation. Mary Falcon didn't go to Hogwarts in 1991, Neville was not mistaken. This was someone new, who didn't exist last time. The three of them changed something big. He knew they did. I'm Neville, but you know that. I assume you know that guy over there. Neville said, a false smile jumping forward, but his mind still raced. He knew something was definitely wrong at Hogwarts, very wrong. And he made a quick decision in rebuttal. Don't panic. Don't give away any sign that he knew, and be vigilant, constantly. Yeah, everyone knows him. I was just curious, he isn't what we all expected. Everyone expected a tireless hero, who could keep going despite all trials, all that would go wrong, and save us all. The boy who lived, and all that. Mary muttered softly, her eyes trailing Harry's unconscious form. Harsh criticism clear in her eyes. Neville could see she had something personal against his best mate. But he falls into a coma before even a month passes, and is close to death. He showed that he's human, and everyone now hates him for it. He's just a bit disappointing, I guess. Quote, Neville watched her, and didn't really know what to say. He didn't really know what to do either. And just watched the strange, impossible girl cautiously. After a short time had passed, he figured out what to say. There's a lot more to him than people think. Elohim. Ah, easy. Elohim, the god of almost every religion, hissed as cleansing alcohol was pressed deep into his sliced neck, the fiery liquid igniting his throat in bloody torment. He pushed against the one helping him, and clenched his teeth in pain. Hera, just, give me a minute. The woman, his wife, through many lives, just reared back and gave him a long glance. Her azure eyes scanned over him, before lowering the medical tools she had held while assisting him in his recovery. Elo, You haven't called me Hera in over 2,000 years. Are you lost in yourself again? The goddess known as Ophir, once Hera, asked critically as she watched her husband with a cold gaze. She grew tired of their rivalry back in Greece, she had a hatred of it now. No, I'm just, Elohim tried to retort, but was interrupted by a quick shaking fit. Before he could say anything, his form shifting from the elderly man he tended to be, into the bulky Greek god, to a glowing blue man, into the large floating skull known as Nuthel. And finally back to the elderly form of Elohim. Yes, I am. I changed too many times. Ophir just frowned at him, as she knew how his endless mental struggle worked. As he always found himself lost after constant shifting. America was horrible for him, so many cultures shoved onto a single continent. You had to fight him, didn't you? She questioned in a light whisper, as she watched a thin stream of gold blood trickle down his neck, his robe staining from it. Unfortunately, the god was at his limit. After being beat into painful submission, lying in loud agony in his own throne room, and then being grizzled and passively tortured by his own wife, he had enough. In a quick moment, the aged man changed his form, a monstrous tree-like monster filled his seat. Bark teeth snarling in her direction. Large, sharp tree branches wrapped around her, razor-sharp leaves lightly piercing her skin. Elohim was lost in himself, and there was only the original left. Now, he was the father of nature, the architecture of all plant life. What would you expect me to do? Let him kill me, let him kill you, let him burn heaven to the ground. Eden, the personification of light and peace, roared in anger as he choked his wife in fury. Ophir didn't panic, she didn't become angry, she just stared at him coldly. She didn't need to yell, or nag, or scream. She never needed to, not in all the long years they'd shared together. She had never and still didn't. Her disappointment in him was just enough. I expected you not to fight him. You are brothers, no matter how old you get. He is still your younger brother. Never forget that Elohim. At her tone, Eden shrunk, its bark shifting back into skin, and it became Elohim once again, as his anger melted away like wax under the blazing sun. In moments, he was a small, elderly man once more. He avoided her gaze however, and stared down at his bandaged hands. His shame in himself overrode all other feelings he felt. Being the brother of the devil was a difficult task, an almost impossible one. Did you expect him to? Harry James Potter 2081, in a way. Hello Harrison, I'd like to show you something. This is the result of your work. What you'll leave behind, your legacy. The hell of your creation. A soft voice spoke out in the emptiness of his mind, as Harry Potter floated in the darkness of his mind. At the sound, his eyes flew open, and he saw what appeared to be Buckingham Palace, in one of his eyes. In the other, he saw a city, Washington, D.C. Not that he'd know what it looked like, he had never left Europe. Despite his desires, in Buckingham, Harry saw a burning city, death all around him. Wooden pikes reached upwards to the sky, bodies impaled deep onto them, there. Faces forced and ripped open. Black blood flowing from their broken jaws. To Harry's horror, the spiked peaks of the pikes stabbed upwards from the unfortunate souls' mouths, the other side piercing up between their legs. Harry despised the images before him, the crimson sky illuminating the carnage in a horrific light. The city gave off a very vampiric feel that would scar him for many years to come. No matter how much he brooded, or how much time he spent around Lucifer, he didn't think he'd ever grow used to death. He didn't fail to notice as well, that many of the impaled victims were those people that had been the Dursleys' neighbors. Those people that had ignored his torment, and those that had allowed the Dursleys to continue on as they were. Getting sick of it, he closed his left eye, and surveyed Washington. It wasn't much better. Swarms of gigantic locusts flooded the capital, zombie-like fungi creatures populated the streets, filling the city with the wicked dead. The Washington Monument lay on its side now, the crushed White House lying underneath its bulk. It was obvious nothing living remained in the residence that once housed the most charismatic and political America had to offer. Above the White House was now a tall flag post, with a simple flag printed. A design was emboldened on it, a several millennia-old symbol, one formed by celestial space and the Lord of creation. A crooked crescent moon was the symbol for this new nation, the symbol emblazoned on each twisted soldier under a different Harry's command, each territory branded by his dark mark. This mark had haunted all humans, and had grown a horrific meaning. No longer was it simply a lunar state, it was now a symbol of hatred and spite. The entire world was afraid when the moon went crescent. In focus, the United States were no more, that was obvious just by its ruined capital. It was the first casualty of a far future's rampage and tirade, of one demonic Harry Potter. Harry didn't know whether to be proud, or horrified. Just as with England, he didn't know whether the undead were better than the impalement that was standard in England. He also didn't know whether he truly was behind all of this, as that voice. That voice wasn't trustworthy, some part of him said as much. I wouldn't lie, I have no reason to. All of this destruction, this was all of your work, combined into one single apocalypse. Armageddon, from your fingertips, death and destruction, for 100 years, you've laid waste to man and wizarding kind. This is the child of your mayhem. Your hopes and dreams, made real. The voice said, its tone absolute and unbearing, almost with a sense of hatred. Harry figured that whoever it was, held a deep vendetta against him. He didn't know if he cared, really. One man cannot destroy all of humanity. Harry spoke out, his voice echoing out in the space around him. He was assured of himself. It's impossible, trust me, Hitler tried. Now he's Lucifer plaything. A dark chuckle emerged then, the sound wrapping tightly around him, the harshness choking him roughly, his breath shallow and painful, blood trickling slightly from his nose. I've seen it before, you'd be surprised. War has a habit of happening. Quote, Lucifer. Nowhere, and somewhere, he stood in his reprieve. The place where nothing resided, a place much like the realm of his birth. Where a single island rested among utter nothingness. A fraction of himself found it comforting, the other found it unnerving. He was recovering, the best he could after what he endured. He won, of course, but his body didn't. His injuries weren't deep or severe, but they weren't light either. He still bled, he still felt pain. He still lost blood, he still hurt just as the common man did, but his pain had requirements. Only a fellow immortal could pierce his skill, and only 4 remained in the mortal realm. While a mortal could cause him pain, only a god could kill him. He was taking a breath, relaxing his tightened muscles, when he felt a strong disturbance knock him off his feet, his body flying off the floating platform. He struggled against the aggressive force that clawed at his blackened soul. His mind being mauled and torn, his personality being wrung to a painful extent. He found himself soaring downwards then, far down into dead space. Before he vanished and appeared in a place he had seen last, so very long ago. He had vowed not to return, and then only under the most important of occasions. Lucifer had never wanted to come back, never have to face his greatest mistake, his greatest enemy. His only superior left, the superior to all. Hello Lucifer, you really shouldn't get so distracted. Who knows what could happen when you do. All of that power of yours gets distracted from what it should be doing. Keeping the skeleton in your closest, locked in. A creepy, terrifying yet attractive voice spoke in the obsidian cell. It was a square box, far under the surface of hell. Far from anyone that could find it. The worst being in creation, the strongest being in the entire multiverse. The one being who could destroy everything on a whim, whose only restriction was the cell it was jailed in, but which only strained it. It could still force its influence on anything and everything if it so chose. Lucifer looked up from the rough floor, and met the eyes of his mortal enemy and hated prisoner. The creature had piercing and cold verdant eyes, white ivory skin, and long, shadowy hair. Its lean, emaciated face was covered in a long, scratchy beard, which fell far below its collar. It had a large, sharp grin, much like a nightmarish creature. Its smile scared even Lucifer, and the man wasn't meant to fear anything. The creature was a thing Lucifer loved. One of his favorite children, one of the limitless Harry Potters that filled the multiverse. But this one differed from all the others. This was the strongest of all of them. This variation didn't go by the name of Harry Potter, or Harrison, or Hayden, or any other. This Harry went by a single title. A title that conveyed its state, above all others. You know, it is quite odd that Lucifer, the Lord of Hell in so many lifetimes, fears a single man. A mere wizard, a mortal. You're supposed to be above them, aren't you? That is why you split from your brother, isn't it? You're above mortals. But that doesn't make sense. Quote, the creature asked, its voice mocking as it walked around its prison space, its suppressive shackles lying at its feet, as it walked free. Despite the fact that it never was meant to, it showed Lucifer the consequences of his ignorance and forgetfulness. That is, unless you fear me. You fear a mere mortal. One of your beloved children. One of your many Harry Potters. Your favorite human. How does it feel, to have a human be so much more powerful than you? The creature asked, as bolts of dark purple lightning appeared in the stale air. Their tips hovering over Lucifer's body, the destructive forces ready to attack when needed. It grinned then, its razor-sharp teeth shining dangerously in the dim light, a single lantern lit. Ghtting up the old cell in an orange glint. I fear nothing, Lucifer muttered, only to cry out in agony as 15 dark bolts of corrupted electricity stabbed through his body, pain like he had never felt before. Burst throughout every single one of his nerve cells. The pain was unbearable, and he began to sink into unholy unconsciousness. I'll make sure to earn your fear then. You will regret the day you thought you could cage me like a damn dog. Now then, I've got an appointment to catch, the creature said joyfully, as it stepped over Lucifer's collapsed body, as it began to phase from the room. I'm make sure to send your regards to your children. I'll tell them what you fear. And give them an example of why you do. Quote, Lucifer could do absolutely nothing, as the worst creature in all of the universes left the only place that could contain it. That could hold the prodigy, Harry James Potter. Hogwarts Hospital Wing, September 21, 1991. Before the sun had even the chance to rise, Harry Potter was pulled back into the domain of the living forcefully, as his mind lost its harsh grip on his being. When he finally lifted his eyelids, Harry saw two familiar redheads standing over him, peering over him. Though his instincts answered him when he thought of who they were, his memories and insight pointed out that he was wrong. The two figures before him weren't who they appeared to be. He had seen as much, but he needed to know who exactly they were. He narrowed his eyes at them, and began to think before asking a simple question. So, you guys with Lucifer, or Birdman? The two didn't say a word however, their twisting grins being his only answer. It was enough of an answer, as their silence told as much. He didn't agree, as he wanted an answer, and he'd have it. No, seriously, who the fuck are you guys? Really? Harry asked with a fine and sharp point, as he rose up in the uncomfortable hospital cot. He had forgotten how bad they were, as it had been far too long since his stays in the hospital wing. For sure, he wouldn't be lured back into Quidditch. The two Weasley imposters just looked at each other, before stepping forward to address him. The taller of the two, the one Harry would normally identify as George Weasley, spoke first. Hello Potter, I am Motnert, the union leader of Hell's Seductive Circle, an association comprised of Hell's succubi and incubi. My agents cover the world, masquerading as celebrities, royalty, and politicians, allowing myself, and by extension our king, control over the weak-minded of Earth. The impostor, Motnert, spoke with an elegance that Harry had never heard before, as he motioned for a simple handshake. Harry however narrowed his eyes, as a warm feeling washed over him. A feeling he immediately crushed into sparkly dust. The gesture didn't go unnoticed, as Motnert broke into a grin at Harry's mental vigilance. Good. Simply shaking my hand would have overloaded your mind with an intense lust, that of such a strong degree that you would have begged me for release. Nicely done, the incubus said with a soft glare, as Harry simply stepped back from the demon, and transferred his gaze to the other entity. All the while trying to ignore how disturbed he was. The being disguised as Frederick Weasley stepped closer then, his eyes flashing crimson, before returning to Fred's natural brown. He swept his eyes over Harry, before nodding. It is nice to finally meet you Potter. I am Zetodath, the general of Hell's army, and punisher of sinners. I commanded Lucifer's forces during the First Rebellion, and helped defend Hell's borders when the Rapture happened. The suddenly gruff Weasley twin said, as he scrutinized Harry with just a glare, and apparently found him appropriate, though he could swear there was an ounce of malicious intent there as well. Harry, of course, questioned this, and spoke the first thing that came to his mind. "I thought rapture happens at the end of the world," he asked in curiosity, as he once again looked over the two. Where they had once looked as the gangly Weasley twins, they now appeared as well-fit beings, one seeming like the bastard son of Lucius Malfoy and Fleur Delacour, and the other an apparent cousin of Alistair Moody. Descedant merely tilted his head, and asked of him this. "You're aware of separate timelines, yes?" At that, Harry nodded, as he now existed in one. "Well, there are alternate universes as well. Hell, however, is universal. One hell, one devil. You understand what that means, yes?" Harry thought about it then, and came to the obvious answer. "There've been worlds where the rapture happened already." "Correct. Perhaps you aren't an idiot," Montagnard said in surprise, as his eyes bored through Harry, as if he could see the thoughts racing through his mind as they appeared. Harry glared at them both, before returning to the point of the conversation. "Well, what are you two doing here anyway?" "Lucy decided I needed babysitters." Descedant growled slightly, before regaining his composure swiftly, though an anger still shined in his dark eyes. "As certain beings have decided to play along with us, despite the implications. Our king decided that the two of us are to prevent incidents such as the one that you suffered," he explained gruffly, before continuing. "But let me make this clear, we are not teachers, we're not your friends. And we will not listen to your complaints and whining about anything. We're here for the angels, that's it." Harry nodded at that. Though he respected the general, he had a newfound enemy, that he was sure. The man's bluntness was admirable though. Seeing that Harry wasn't going to discuss anything else, the two imposters began to exit the clinic, though Montagnard stopped to glance back at him. "By the way, Harry, the seer should be here soon, prepare your ribs," the incubus said briefly, before jogging from the room. Harry wondered what the man meant, before he felt a sharp impact on his sorry ribcage, as blonde hair suddenly clouded his vision. "Oh yeah, Luna, forgot about her." Neville Joel Longbottom, October 21, 1991. Neville had never felt such a desire to kill someone since Lestrange. But he really wanted to murder the devil. Hermione Granger, the last Hermione, was the most annoying person Neville had ever met. The insane teen constantly whined of how Harry had changed, and how Ron wouldn't pay attention to her. It literally took a binding and an oath just to prevent her from revealing the events of the previous timeline. Luckily, her defense and idea of self-preservation had vanished along with her sanity, and she didn't even question when they forced her into the oath of secrecy. Neville didn't really know whether her obsession with Harry was useful, as his best friend could convince her to do near anything, or if it was a curse in itself. She always insisted on joining the three of them when they traversed Hogwarts, and sat herself by them whenever possible. The girl was quickly making him regret wasting his rifle on Riddle. His mood was better though, as Harry had recovered quickly, and the trio had been reunited with haste. Things were slightly easy, as Draco no longer seemed to be possessed, though they still threatened the inbred snot whenever he even approached them, allowing them relative peace. When one has angels and God himself as enemies, one little wizard afraid of death didn't really faze them. Neville, though, had his attention focused on someone entirely different. Ever since he encountered her, Mary Falcon, a girl they seemingly created, still plagued him. He would often question exactly how she even existed, as she definitely wasn't around in the last timeline. It also didn't help that he felt such an attraction to her. A near obsession with her sea foam eyes, a dark amethyst, the shade of her hair, haunting his dreams. Why did she have such a strong effect on him, when no other had before? He had once felt affection for another Hufflepuff, Hannah Abbott, but that hadn't evolved into anything. A war is not the time to covet love. He had wondered if the blonde had returned his feelings. But he figured he wouldn't know now. He had a thought then, and that was that even though he was technically 18, and had the mental capacity of 400, he still had the hormones of a 12-year-old. Why did he agree to go back again? The Prodigy. Universe Designation 641, Deadeye. The Prodigy, the definite Harry Potter, stepped forward with interest, as he entered a new dimension. This was the first step on his search for Lucifer's precious trio, as this universe was the closest he could reach from his rushed exit out of Hell's borders. He now stood in what appeared to be Hogwarts, though the castle now was devoid of life, and in a terrible state of condition. Filth littered the halls, while stone and wood crumbled from the walls. Darkness filled the fortress. Prodigy could clearly see the blood and gore that stained the floors. After seeing the pile of slaughtered students, now decayed to blackened skeletons, Prodigy sent a pulse of dark red energy out, allowing him a vision of the castle ground. With that, he was gifted a glimpse of time. In just a day, 200 students died, and killed each other. Why couldn't this have been mine? Prodigy pondered to himself, as he kicked the decrepit body of Ronald Weasley, before closing his eyes firmly, and letting out a breath. From what he could sense from the fabric of this realm, rather than the large population average from most universes, this one held a small amount. Only a rough 1,000 humans lived in this world. Only one was magical. Prodigy was the smartest being in creation, and it took but a second to know who that one wizard would be, and allowed a wave of magic to surround himself. Within moments, he began to flash, before disappearing. Before Prodigy, a tall and bulky figure stood, watching a crowd of creatures march through the streets of New York. Prodigy walked to the figure, and saw that the man had long and scraggly, dark hair, and was clothed in filthy robes. The man appeared to be missing an arm, though a short stave was attached at the stump. Over the shoulder, an aged shotgun rested on the man, as he looked over the crowd of screaming people below. Prodigy and the man looked down from the ledge they stood on, as the squirming and screaming crowds before roared up at them. Oddly enough, rather than the undead Prodigy had seen before, in many different worlds. These monsters spoke, or rather screamed. They taunted the man before, though that only lasted until one of the creatures noticed Prodigy. One of the creatures, an elderly man missing half of his skull, along with both arms, screamed up at them. With that, the wizard had his attention pulled from the crowd, and only now noticed Prodigy. Before he could even react, a glowing stave was pointed right at his face. Though it worried him not. Prodigy was the strongest being in creation. What did one Harry Potter, stave or not, mean to him? Who are you? The Potter growled, as his eyes narrowed. The stave acting as his arm, glowing a bright green. Prodigy merely grinned, as a mass of magic began to build outside of the other man's vision. At the image of Prodigy, his ornate self just fired the killing curse, though it had no effect. As the gruff Potter stared at him in shock, Prodigy just grinned, his razor teeth rising in a mockery of a smile. The Prodigy, the one above all, and the man who will destroy the multiverse, Prodigy said with a snark, as a spark appeared in his dark eyes. Before the other man could even think, a swarm of dark magic surged forward, and blasted a bloody, charred crater straight through what was once the man's chest. The Potter collapsed then, a single, pained gasp escaped his throat, as the life left his tortured body. Prodigy grinned, before looking over the confused crowd of undead before him. He glared down at them, before snapping 2 fingers. In an instant, each of the monsters dropped dead, as he purged this world. He reached up to the sky, as a golden glow began to surround himself. The air stiffened, the sky began to grow dark, and all that was around him faded. Yet another reality fell before him, as he absorbed all that remained of this universe. His mission yet another step forward, he opened his glimmering eyes, and set a mental course to yet another world. Perhaps this one would be the world so revered by the Lord of Hell. Whether it was or not, he knew this. His will would be done, and these foolish reflections of himself would cease to exist. Their strength would aid him. His anger would guide him. Fate would fight him. Nevertheless, he would triumph. He would be the sole being. He would be the last in existence. The old ones would be destroyed. The gods would pay for their arrogance. He, the Prodigy, would reign supreme, and nothing would stop him. Not even Harry Potter. Apollyon. Universe Designation 9. It was with a grimace that Apollyon climbed from his seat and looked over the carnage before him. The destruction and mayhem stretched far beyond his home, but he need not worry. Those that would have reversed the damage, prevented his domination, had all been slaughtered by his own hand. This was his world, his kingdom, and none would take his place. That had been his mantra for so long, and that which had carried him from his grief and raised him into such a high stature. A power and control over all others. That had been what he believed, until a subtle shock wave echoed across his world. Whoever had the courage to invade his dimension, his home, his domain, would pay. Sensing the disturbance, Apollyon turned on the spot, and took notice of the man before him. It was obviously another variation of himself, that face. Those eyes, all that composed the stranger so familiar. He knew few Potters held such a power over dimension travel, and as this man didn't fit the standard, it meant only one thing. His visitor was a destroyer, a being beyond creation. Beyond reason and logic. Whoever this thing was, Apollyon would stop it. No matter what this meant for him and all others, he would destroy the destroyer. For all that had been lost. No more.